As the investigation team heads to Aoshan district, Zhang Yi finally decided to brief his family about the entire situation at present. At this moment inside the shelter, Zhang Yi sat on the sofa in the living room, playing with a silver metal lighter in his hand. Then, accompanied with a clicking sound, the lid of the lighter was opened and closed by him. The flame burned brightly, and the red flame was thin and long, as sharp as a saber. It was snowing outside the window, but the shelter was warm as spring. Zhang Yi looked at the flame in front of him. After thinking for a long time, he finally decided to disclose everything to the people around him. After all, to achieve his desired results, he would, one way or the other, need their help. He also knew that Bian Junwu and the others are probably at or close to Aoshan district by now, and this was all within his expectations. And although he lied to them by omitting some relevant details and suspicions to make them stay in the city, it was absolutely necessary because the large number of hidden zombies will soon usher in an outbreak. And that means that the real zombie war in Tianhai City is not far away either. Everything so far was progressing slowly, but if it all goes as he is expecting, then the previous battle at the camp of the Snow Worship Sect was just a realistic drama. However, this time around, the decisive battle will have a pressure index raised by many levels. And, in the end, if things are not well controlled, the entire Tianhai City will be destroyed by the zombie tide. Zhang Yi must grasp the measure and control the development of the situation within his ability. At the very least, he must ensure that he and the people around him can survive. And at the absolute worst, he must survive at all cost. It's time. They should also be mentally prepared. Zhang Yi closed the lid of the lighter with a click, and then called out to the AI system in the shelter. "Shao AI, help me notify everyone in the shelter. Tell them all to come to the living room immediately." The AI's voice sounded, replying that it understands the command. Then, the very next second, it announced the command to every corner of the shelter. When everyone heard this, they showed a curious look on their faces. Because, except Yang Xinxin, no one knew that the zombie crisis had not been resolved. And in the past, Zhang Yi would only call everyone for a meeting when they were facing major problems. So, everyone was alert and curious as to what had happened again. Yang Xinxin had a dark smile on her face as she controlled her wheelchair and left the control room with a knowing look. "Oh, big brother, is it time to take the next step already?" A few minutes later, everyone in the shelter gathered in the lounging room, and they all looked at Zhang Yi with concern. "Zhang Yi, what's wrong? Did something happen again?" Seeing Zhang Yi's serious expression, it was obvious to everyone that there was a storm coming. So as everyone was questioning Zhang Yi as to why he called for a gathering, Yang Xinxin also acted as though she was clueless to what was going on. "Big brother," she said, "any new discoveries?" Zhang Yi didn't keep them in suspense and told them what happened directly. "After the battle, I did some investigation and found something alarming. I found out that the zombie siege was not a natural disaster, but a man-made disaster. There is also a huge conspiracy behind it that directly or indirectly affect everyone in Tianhai City." Zhang Yi said everything in a gentle tone, starting from Zhou Qir's discovery of Yuan Konga having multiple superpowers. It ended with him discovering a large number of zombies hidden in Aoshan district. Zhang Yi even displayed that piece of evidence on the large screen for everyone to see. And because the matter was too complicated, and the layout was too meticulous and had long-term goal, Zhang Yi had to slow down and analyze it for them bit by bit. By the time he was done telling the story, half an hour had passed. The air in the room was filled with a strange atmosphere. Everyone had a strange expression on their face. They felt like they were listening to a suspense story with constant twists and turns. If you don't listen carefully to any detail, it's hard to figure out the ins and outs of it. You can slowly savor the fun of the story, he continued lightly. Now everyone just needs to remember that the ultimate goal of Yuan Konga and the Snow Worship Sect is to destroy all the forces in Tianhai City. Then, if possible, gain the power of all the mutants in the city. As for what plans she has in the future, it has nothing to do with us. Our real problem is how to get rid of this big trouble of her right now. Yang Min, who was standing not far from Zhang Yi, had a pale face when she heard this. She had her fingers intertwined, and with a voice like she's talking for the first time, she asked, "Then, won't she have to kill me?" Death Return is an ability that will only be activated after killing the mutant who has been implanted with an ice soul. In the shelter, only Yang Min had been implanted with an ice soul. And although her ability is more auxiliary, it was very useful. But the key point is that, when it comes to Yuan Konga, she has no intention of letting anyone survive when she was done. Ice soul or no ice soul, killing one person or 1,000 was still killing, and inconsequential in her eyes, so there was no reason to let Yang Min go. Her cousin Zhou Qir secretly felt lucky that she didn't take an ice soul. She also finally understood why Zhang Yi was so against it. Zhang Yi comforted Yang Min and said calmly, "You don't have to worry for now. If things go as we expected, Yuan Konga's conspiracy will not succeed." But this made Liang Yu ask worriedly, "But if it is really as you said, Yuan Konga now has at least a dozen or even dozens or possibly hundreds of supernatural powers. Who can deal with her?" Zhang Yi crossed his hands under his chin. "Yes, who is it?" everyone asked curiously. "Bian Junwu." Zhang Yi said the name seriously. This is why he tried his best to keep the investigation team. When Zhang Yi said Bian Junwu's name, Liang Yu, Uncle Yu, and Chunlei nodded. They have all seen Bian Junwu's strength. That kind of powerful and terrifying pupil technique can instantly destroy everything the eyes can see. If it weren't for the side effects, Bian Junwu's ability rating would definitely be qualified to reach the Ypsilon level. But for Zhang Yi, as long as his power can disintegrate Yuan Konga's conspiracy, that's enough. Whether Bian Junwu's lifespan eventually shortens to the point that he even dies, if it's still a result he hopes for, then it's fine. Zhang Yi knew that this was a bit unkind and completely cruel, but in order for himself and the people around him to live well, he could only sacrifice some people who had nothing to do with him. And although there was a little bit of guilt in his heart, it was because Bian Junwu had invited him to join Blizzard City and showed some goodwill. But I have no choice. Zhang Yi secretly reassures himself. If only one side can survive, I will choose me and the people around me, always. Then, Zhang Yi began to tell everyone about the future plan. I tell you this so that you can be mentally prepared. If the situation gets out of control and the investigation team fails, we must leave Tianhai City. There are enough supplies in my alternate space to survive well even if we go somewhere else. The only regret is that we will lose this shelter with a top-level defense system. So, non-combatants, don't take off your clothes when you sleep these days. Be ready to transfer at any time. As for combatants, your task is the simplest. Be ready to fight at any time, and then follow my orders. After listening to Zhang Yi's words, everyone had no objections. Liang Yu asked curiously, "What about the other forces, the zombies or the snow worship sect?" Zhang Yi took a deep breath, looked at her dimly and stretched out his hand, pointing to the sky. At that time, the god of death of love will attack indiscriminately and destroy the entire Tianhai City in an instant. Zhang Yi was uncharacteristically relaxed when he said this. Not only do they have to deal with zombies in the hundreds of thousands, but they also have to deal with an extremely powerful mutant. This situation was simply despairing. And not only was Zhang Yi making a light joke of their situation, but was also very relaxed as well. Everyone's expression, on the other hand, was basically incredulous with a bitter smile. If that situation really happened, they would have no room for resistance. Zhang Yi leaned on the sofa, his eyes momentarily closed as he takes a deep breath. He said lightly, "If it's like that, let it be. Everything that's supposed to come will eventually come. I have planned everything. What man proposes, God disposes. Whether everything can develop as smoothly as imagined depends on God's will." Zhang Yi is self-aware, although he and Yang Xinxin have made plans to deal with the zombie tide and the snow worship sect. But this world is full of surprises. Therefore, he arranged a retreat for everyone. Once the plan fails, they must leave Tianhai City as soon as possible. And for Yuan Konga and the others, the person she hates the most wasn't him, Zhang Yi, but the leaders of the other major forces. After all, after the end of the world, the grievances between them were the deepest, and Yuan Konga would definitely deal with them first. Zhang Yi told everyone to go and get ready, and after saying all this, inwardly, he hopes this plan of his goes smoothly. Then, he took out the satellite phone and started the mechanical mouse. "Let this lead the way for Bian Junwu and the others," he commented with a smile. The scene shifts to Aoshan District, at the entrance of the subway tunnel. Bian Junwu and his team had arrived. And as usual, Meng Xiu was asked to use her ability to investigate the situation below, and then the others would follow in to investigate. They were not afraid of the zombies, but they were confused and worried about the manipulator behind them. But now, they first had to confirm whether the information provided by Zhang Yi was true. Everyone entered the depths of the tunnel and began to slowly use Meng Xiu's ability to investigate the surrounding situation, and then moved forward. Zhang Yi gave them the specific location where the zombies were found, and they soon found this place. Meng Xiu's ability can cover an area of 3 kilometers. So with her ability activated, she saw everything deep in the subway tunnel. The zombies lying densely in the muddy and humid environment made her look extremely solemn. "How is it, Xiaoyu?" Seeing that her expression was not right, Bian Junwu asked. Meng Xiu took a deep breath, and then said to her teammates, "There are indeed zombies here, and the number is very scary, at least hundreds of thousands." Hearing that there are so many zombies here, Everyone frowned. But they were not too scared. They already have rich experience in dealing with zombies. They know the combat effectiveness of the zombie group and their habits. The sleeping zombies will not wake up unless they are controlled by the corpse king or smell the breath of the living. Bien Junwoo pushed his dark sunglasses. Then we will later destroy them. Bien Junwoo decided to take everyone to retreat from the subway first. Then call for support from the Jiangnan district and directly use missiles to attack this coordinate. Now, it is impossible to clean up such a large number of zombies with just them and the remaining forces of Tianhai City. We must ask for help. Everyone nodded, but just as they were about to leave, they suddenly heard a series of low roars from the end of the tunnel. It was like a flood coming from the end of the tunnel, and even the ground under their feet was shaking. Bailey Chongqing immediately shouted, "Oh no! It's the tide of corpses!" The seven-man team's expression immediately changed. They were obviously careful enough and did not rashly approach the location of the corpse group. But they were still discovered by them. Now they have no other choice but to evacuate quickly. Go! Escape to the ground. Bien Junwoo gave an order, and everyone quickly started to run back. Just behind them, the corpse group swept in like a torrent. There was a scarlet, bloodthirsty light flashing in their eyes. In the huge torrent, there were also huge copper-armored corpses, and even copper-armored flying corpses with wings took off and flew away from the top of the torrent. The sudden zombie riot forced the investigation team to quickly flee underground. Something is wrong. Why are the actions of these zombies different from before? Wu Di said this, gritting his teeth. Bailey Chongqing explained calmly while running. If everything is really as we thought, perhaps everything the zombies showed before was just a performance. Performance? Are they performing for us? Wu Di asked. Bailey Chongqing nodded. Their purpose is to make us think that the mission was completed and then leave Tianhai City. Thinking about it now, it was really too easy for us to kill the Corpse King. Especially in that battle, all the zombie kings all appeared in the same area. It was as if they were placed there for us to kill. For the first time, Bailey Chongqing lost his calm smile on his face. His expression was a little gloomy. Now we have to complete the mission, not to kill the so-called Corpse King, but the manipulator behind the zombie group. As he was running, the bronze-armored flying corpse behind him had already caught up. Wu Di condensed a floating cannon in his right hand, aimed at it and fired. A powerful energy beam hit the copper-armored flying corpse, opening a large hole in its chest and knocking it to the ground. But such an injury was not enough to kill it. It was obvious that its defense was stronger than that of an ordinary copper-armored corpse. However, another one soon replaced the other in the air, roaring angrily and chasing after them. The sound of its wings was getting louder and louder. Behind it, dozens of copper-armored flying corpses had already reached the investigation team. Bailey Chongqing took off the huge Black Knight's lance from his back and turned to face them. The nearly 3-meter-long lance danced like a windmill in his hand. And as a strengthening mutant, his ability simply strengthens the body's various functions. Also, as one of the top warriors in Blizzard City, he can hardly find an opponent in hand-to-hand combat. After all, he was an unbreakable shield mountain. Bailey Chongqing had a cold smile on his face and swept the lance in his hand towards the copper-armored flying corpse in front of him. A huge copper-armored flying corpse was hit by him in the waist. With a click, the slender waist was broken directly, and the huge body was smashed out like a garbage bag. Bastards, since you won't go back to the depths of the tunnel, I'll send you back home. He then shouted for the rest to leave first. He was obviously a strong man with a height of nearly 2 meters, wielding a huge and heavy weapon. He can definitely hold on for the others to get to safety. You must protect the boss and the others, so leave first, I'll cover the rear. He said this to Wu Di, who nodded in agreement. So as the torrent of zombies rumbled and rushed forward, Bailey Chongqing stood his grounds as Bien Junwoo and the others ran to the subway exit. They didn't even look behind them, and this was due to the trust they had in him. So as Bailey Chongqing faced the tide alone, his movements were extremely flexible, creating a black afterimage on the lance in his hand. His attacks were so fierce that not even the copper-armored flying corpses could dodge. Immediately as the team made it out of the subway and got in the van, a deafening explosion occurred at the entrance of the tunnel seconds later. And immediately after, Bailey Chongqing came out, covered in black smoke as he coughs a little. He held his lance in his hand, and his body was also covered with mucus, which was the blood of zombies. Bailey Chongqing quickly got inside the van and told Meng Xiu to drive. Let's go. There's too many of them. With everyone safely inside, Meng Xiu drove the van at full speed and fled far away. Bien Junwoo looked through the rearview mirror and saw that the zombies were pouring out of the cave in a dense mass, and then ran all the way across the snowfield. The most terrifying ones were the bronze-armored corpses and bronze-armored flying corpses. They were faster than the ordinary zombies, chasing closely behind the car and making a harsh hissing sound. Wu Di gritted his teeth, opened the car window, and fired the floating gun at the back. Sharpshooter Qi Guangming also stood up from the skylight, raised his black sniper rifle and began to snipe the zombies behind him. But this sight made them feel terrified. The overwhelming zombies came like a tsunami, and they were like a small boat that was about to be submerged by the tsunami. Now the competition was speed. Once their car was submerged by zombies, everyone would definitely die there. Even the top mutants would not be able to survive if they encountered such a large number of zombies. As Sharpshooter Qi Guangming continued to snipe the zombies with his black rifle, a flying bronze-armored corpse, with its long, sharp, and piercing claws, closed the distance between them in an instant. Seeing this, Qi Guangming's eyes widened, realizing that it was too late to dodge. Damn it! It's too late, he thought. Fortunately for him, a dazzling golden light swept directly in front of him, then across. And as he got over his initial shock and looked below him, it was Bien Junwoo, who had taken off his sunglasses and activated his destructive power, Nirvana. Bien Junwoo then appeared from the front window with his power still activated. Then seconds later, the large part of the huge zombie swarm was immediately melted away. There were at least thousands of zombies, and they were destroyed by this single attack. With the zombie tide completely annihilated, the group drove off, escaping with their lives. However, seconds after, another deafening sound echoed throughout the entire van. And this was Bien Junwoo, who was coughing even more violently than before. With his current physical condition, every time he activated his destructive power, Nirvana, he was consuming his already limited lifespan. But the situation they were recently in left him no choice. They had no way to hold the zombie tide back and safely flee from there as well. Bien Junwoo bought a certain amount of time for the car, and the zombie swarm behind him was pulled away. But they still stared at Bien Junwoo and the others, and the speed of pursuit did not slow down at all. Bien Junwoo's heart sank. Seeing the horror of this zombie swarm, he finally realized that the previous mission could be completed so easily, and it must be someone who did it deliberately. And this time, the zombie operator thought they had left Tianhai City, so he or she lost control of the zombies. This made the investigation team see the real horror of the zombie swarm. Boss, these things don't know how to get tired. It's not a solution to keep running like this. We have to ask for help, Bailey Chongqing said with a serious face. Bien Junwoo stopped coughing forcibly, with a large amount of blood on the corner of his mouth. He said coldly, "Let's go to the nearest shelter first, then notify all the forces in Tianhai City and ask them to send people to help." It was too late to ask for help from the Jiangnan region. It is impossible to let them launch missiles and carry out indiscriminate attacks, right? They will die too. Several large shelters are undoubtedly the best choice now. Those were fortifications built for the state of war. As long as they hide underground, no matter how many zombies there are, they can't break through in a short time. Meng Xiu was already checking the map. The nearest shelter is Radiant Prosperity Base. Go there, then notify other families and send people to assist immediately, Bien Junwoo said decisively. Yes, boss. Meng Xiu drove the car towards Radiant Prosperity Base while sending messages to the major forces. At this moment inside the base of Radiant Prosperity Base, Xiao Honglian, who had been in a good mood ever since the war ended, was in thoughts with her arms leisurely folded. Xiao Honglian was a bit puzzled, wondering why Zhang Yi requested for the information about all the leaders of the major forces, even though none of them pose a threat to him anyway, especially Yuan Konga and Zheng Yi of the Snow Worship Sect. And although she hadn't figured out why, she was sure Zhang Yi definitely had a motive. But at that very second, her thoughts was cut off by a call. A video call. Meng Xiu, in a rushed tone, told her that a wave of zombies was coming, so they were heading to her place right now to take refuge. Xiao Honglian needed to prepare with very little amount of time. After Xiao Honglian received the news, she jumped up from her chair, stunned. Didn't they say that the zombie problem has been solved? Why are you here again suddenly? And why do you want to seek refuge here? Xiao Honglian instinctively wanted to refuse, but when she thought of the Jiangnan region behind the investigation team, she could only grit her teeth and ask what was going on. However, her question was left unanswered as the video call abruptly ended, and by some coincidence, her right-hand man, Zhuge Qingting, came in at that precise moment with a report. Boss, production has resumed at the base. What are your plans for the future? Indeed, the base had resumed production, and the chimneys of the refinery were emitting black smoke. In an angry and rushed manner, Xiao Honglian, with a surprised look on her face, shouted at Zhuge Qingting, telling him to carry out her orders immediately. Notify everyone now and go back to the shelter immediately. A large-scale corpse tide is coming soon. Let them hide quickly. Quickly, quickly, quickly. Zhuge Qingting was stunned for a moment. Corpse tide, Xiao Honglian said impatiently. There is no time to explain to you, so do it now. Quickly. From Xiao Honglian's urgent tone, Zhuge Qingting saw the urgency of the situation and did not dare to ask any more questions. He hurried to the propaganda room to use the radio to notify everyone in the refinery to immediately retreat to the underground shelter. Meanwhile, at the shelter in Luck Manor, Zhang Yi, like the rest of the other forces, had received the news. Zhang Yi, we need your help now. The other teams have agreed to resist the zombie tide, and everyone is heading to the shelter at Radiant Prosperity Base. Zhang Yi responded calmly when he heard this. We'll be there soon. After learning that Bian Junwu and the others had fled to Radiant Prosperity Base, Zhang Yi knew that his plan had taken an expected turn he didn't wanted. This possibility, although expected, had a counter-plan in place. And he also didn't want Bian Junwu and the others to die, or for them to completely destroy the zombie tide. At least not yet. The investigation team and the zombie tide had a purpose to serve after all. And behind all this, the real enemy was definitely still conspiring with or without this current turn of events. Therefore, only by getting rid of them can all this come to an end. And Bian Junwu's power was indispensable and critical to this current plan of Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi stood up from the sofa and began to change to his combat uniform. Then he checked all the equipment on his body. After doing all this, he called Liang Yu, Chunlei, and Uncle Yu over. They didn't know the ins and outs of everything Zhang Yi had planned, but they were completely on board. Zhang Yi told them they were going to Radiant Prosperity Base to help the investigation team out. Although everyone was prepared, no one expected things to develop so quickly. They had just returned from the Snow Worship Sect not long ago, and they were about to face a new round of turmoil. Don't worry too much. Everyone should stay close to me. Once the situation goes wrong, I will use my two-dimensional doors to quickly travel through space. Then, take you all and flee the battlefield to the shelter as soon as possible. Hearing this, they nodded in understanding, and the eyes of the three were indeed much more reassuring. Following a captain with top-notch life-saving methods had a huge benefit, and the sense of security was easily felt. It didn't matter whether they win or not, the most important thing is that they don't die. Zhang Yi then tells them to go gear up. He will inform Zhokir and the others. Zhang Yi quickly found Zhokir, who wanted to go with him this time also. But Zhang Yi told her what she and the others need to do in the meantime. Don't be idle at home. Put the most important things on you in order and pack them up in the living room. If there is any accident over there, we will come to pick you up as soon as possible. Don't bring too much things because we don't lack a lot of things. Each person can only have one package at most, remember? Several women in the family, who showed up at the scene at this moment, had a worried look on their faces. Zhokir replied that she understands and will fill the rest in about what to do. Yang Xinxin looked calm. She didn't have anything special to bring. Nothing more than a laptop. Brother, don't forget, that's our only chance. She reminded Zhang Yi with a stern look. Zhang Yi, with a similar look, turned his head slightly and nodded slowly. I understand. Until now, except for Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin, no one else really understood how big the crisis they were facing this time. Before they could properly say their goodbyes, Liang Yu, Chunlei, and Uncle Yu came in with their equipment, geared up and ready to leave. We are leaving. Please remember to prepare everything and wait for us in the living room. Zhang Yi patted Zhokir on the head when he said this. Then, they immediately set off to assist the investigation team at Radiant Prosperity Base. Zhokir stood at the window and watched them leave, feeling powerless. On the other side, at the camp of the Snow Worship Sect, when Zhang Yixian saw the message, his brows furrowed deeply. He then crossed the ruins and came to St. John's Cathedral, where he found Yuan Konga praying. Something happened, Zhang Yixian said directly. Yuan Konga slowly opened her eyes and turned to look at Zhang Yixian. There was a wave of light in her cold eyes, with a touch of indifference that was not like that of a human, and piety to the gods. Zhang Yixian said word by word. The matter in Aoshan District was discovered by the investigation team of Jiangnan District. When Yuan Konga heard this, a touch of emotion appeared on her face. Jiangnan District, these 4 words are very deterrent to her. At least now, it is not an existence she is willing to face. Didn't they leave Tianhai City? Why did they appear in Aoshan? Aoshan District was very remote. After the end of the world, there was no one living there immediately after. It was almost a dead place. When the zombie crisis broke out, there was no zombie group active there. Therefore, they chose Aoshan District as the place to hide the zombie group. Even if the investigation team was very careful, they can't search the huge Tianhai City. That's why Yuan Konga felt surprised. Zhang Yixian shook his head. I don't know either. Logically speaking, even if they are searching, they will search around the 5 major forces. After all, these places are the most densely populated. So this is not good news. Yuan Konga frowned slightly, not understanding whether all this was a coincidence or someone did it on purpose. Zhang Yi said, "Now, the zombies have been alarmed and had started to attack the investigation team. They asked us to come over for support and had currently fled to the shelter at Radiant Prosperity Base." Yuan Konga looked up at him. Could this be a trap? A trap to lure us over and then annihilate them in one fell swoop? Zhang Yi was also unable to confirm. He said, "Only the Bloodvine can communicate with the white corpses. The information I got is that the zombies have indeed been disturbed." Yuan Konga was silent. She lowered her head and thought, "Now, the remaining forces in Tianhai City are not enough to compete with me, but I am afraid of the power of those people in Jiangnan District, especially the power of Bian Junwu, the terrible power that destroys everything in sight. Even Yuan Konga is deeply afraid of it now, but also covet it. This may be the reason why she gave an ice soul to Bian Junwu. And at present, she had absorbed 36 kinds of superpowers, but none of them can reach 1/10 of the destructive power of Nirvana. If we don't go, it will arouse their suspicion, right?" Yuan Konga said lightly. Zhang Yi thought about it and nodded in agreement. "You are right, we should go there. But I only need to go there. You can stay here, and even if there is an accident, you will be fine." He looked at Yuan Konga's cold face, and his eyes revealed an unconcealable warmth. That was a love that could not be expressed directly, but was deeply hidden in the heart. Yuan Konga did not reject Zhang Yixian's proposal. Even though she knew that this might be a trap, compared to her great wish, no one was not expendable. Yuan Konga walked over and gently hugged Zhang Yixian's body. "Only you treat me the best." A few minutes later, Zhang Yixian left the church. He summoned the few remaining priests and fathers of the sect, and after briefly explaining the current situation, he called his generals to assist him on his journey. 3 of them had to stay behind, the rest could come along. Basically, all the combat forces that could be dispatched were brought by Zhang Yixian. With the current state of the sect, only one place was still worth protecting. And as for the person he cares about most, no one needs to protect her anymore. So, without ordinary soldiers, they drove towards the coordinate of Radiant Prosperity Base. Meanwhile, at Radiant Prosperity Base, Xiao Honglian was waiting outside with some soldiers for the investigation team. With the little time given, she had managed to quickly arrange for everyone to hide in the shelter. Bian Junwu and his team drove their modified van and quickly approached the base with a grand entrance. From a distance, Xiao Honglian and her men saw the raging snowstorm on the snowfield, surging from the end of the horizon. They had never seen such a scene before. Even though they had fought against the zombie tide before, the zombie tide they encountered had never been as violent as today. Damn it! What kind of thing did they provoke? Xiao Honglian's face also showed a look of fear. With their remaining combat power, it is absolutely impossible to deal with such a huge zombie tide. The black modified van drove into the Radiant Prosperity Base, and Xiao Honglian immediately led her men at the entrance, shouting, "Quick, come here!" The van immediately drove in the direction indicated by Xiao Honglian. With the gates opened, the van did not stop and quickly made its way in. Bian Junwu, Bailey Chongqing, and Kong Sheng jumped down with weapons in their hands. "Hide in the shelter quickly, the zombies behind are too big." Xiao Honglian and the others had already seen it without them having to explain. The zombies followed closely, covering the sky and the ground, and will soon cover all the space around the refinery. With the tide's current number and aggression, Xiao Honglian felt like she was being stabbed with a sharp knife. She knew that, one way or the other, her refinery was completely finished. Once the battlefield was determined to be here, the entire refinery would definitely be destroyed. But now was not the time to think of such things. "Hurry up, we must hide immediately." Xiao Honglian could not think of resisting at all. Fighting against this scale of zombies was simply courting death. Everyone currently outside the doors killed some of the zombies in the front, and then quickly retreated. At the entrance of the shelter, several soldiers guarded the gate and shouted loudly, "Hurry! Come in!" Meng Xiu drove the van into the shelter. Then Bian Junwu and the rest cleared some of the zombies that followed, and quickly jumped into the gate. Xiao Honglian gave an order to close the extremely heavy door of the shelter. It was a door made of 7 thick alloys. Once it was closed, no matter how large the zombie tide was, it would be impossible to break through. Not long after everyone hid in the shelter, the land was completely occupied by the zombie tide. They smelled the breath of the living, so they kept roaring and howling in the sky at the other side, and desperately attacked the door. And all this could be seen through the surveillance inside the shelter. Everyone, including Bien Junwoo, breathed a sigh of relief. Bien Junwoo noticed that Xiao Honglian's face was very ugly. After all, the base that she had worked so hard to build for so long was destroyed in an instant. How could she be happy? Bien Junwoo said to her, "I have notified Zhang Yi, Xing Tian, Wei Dinghai, and the people of the Snow Worship Sect. They will soon bring people to help us. Then we can work together inside and outside to eliminate the zombie tide outside." Xiao Honglian slams the center console in frustration. She didn't need that false reassurance at the moment, because judging from the scale of the zombie tide outside, it is no less than the level they faced in the camp of the Snow Worship Sect that day. But now, their combat effectiveness is less than half of what it was before. How can we fight? Can't you apply for support from the Jiangnan region? Xiao Honglian stared at Bien Junwoo and asked with a serious expression. Bien Junwoo replied in his usual cold tone, "It's not that easy to transfer people from the Jiangnan region. Basically, every investigation team has a mission, and you can't just transfer people around. If you really need to transfer people, you need instructions from the higher-ups." Indeed, factually speaking, Bien Junwoo and his investigation team were one of the best combat forces in the Jiangnan region. And at present, it was a given that the problems they couldn't solve were not things that could be solved by transferring other teams, unless a large force is mobilized to come and annihilate the zombie tide. But to do so, it is necessary to get instructions from the highest level of the Jiangnan region, which is much more troublesome. Then what should we do? Are we supposed to just wait here to die? Xiao Honglian closed her eyes, her tone somewhat helpless. Did she blame the investigation team? There seemed to be no reason to blame them. After all, the zombie crisis itself was a problem that Tianhai City had to face on its own. Even if the investigation team had not come, they would have to solve these problems sooner or later. So she could not complain about them coming to help. She just felt a little sad. Meng Xiu turned on the computer and quickly obtained the footage outside the shelter through the satellite system. This is the situation outside. Bien Junwoo, Xiao Honglian, and the others came to the computer to check the scene outside. Looking down from a high altitude, the entire refinery has been completely occupied by dense swarms of zombies. That feeling is like a farmland full of locusts. People with intensive phobia will have an attack of the disease just by looking at it. Well, now none of us can get out. Xiao Honglian said this with her arms folded as she sighed helplessly. Radiant Prosperity Base was completely engulfed by the zombie tide, and they were roaring and gathering outside the underground shelter of the base. They used various methods to attack the gate of the shelter. Fortunately, this was a military base prepared for war. Even if they attacked with missiles, they had to go through multiple rounds of bombing. With the simple offensive means of these zombies, they could not pose a threat at all. This gave the people in the shelter a chance to breathe a sigh of relief. However, judging from the current situation, it would be too difficult to get out of the shelter. Although the investigation team was composed of elite soldiers, they could only deal with tens of thousands of zombies at most. However, there were hundreds of thousands of zombies outside, and there were a large number of bronze-armored zombies with combat power comparable to that of mutants, as well as bronze-armored flying zombies that could fly. Together, they would definitely not be able to defeat these things. Bien Junwoo frowned slightly, and he suddenly covered his mouth and coughed violently. "Boss! Captain, are you okay?" The subordinates next to him, Wu Di and Bailey Chongqing, looked at Bien Junwoo with concern. Bien Junwoo waved his hand. "It's okay. Now it seems that we have to rely on outside forces." A smile suddenly appeared on the corner of his mouth, although the blood there had not been wiped clean. "Now that they are gathered together, we can apply to the headquarters for airstrike support." Xiao Honglian was refreshed. "Do you mean to say that we can let the Jiangnan district launch missiles here? Nothing is more useful than a missile." "Great. One missile will turn hundreds of thousands of zombies outside into ashes." Bien Junwoo nodded. At this point, this is the only way. They were forced into a desperate situation. They had no way to clean up such a large-scale zombie tide. Although Bien Junwoo was very proud, he would not joke about the lives of himself and his companions. Bien Junwoo took out his satellite phone and began to contact the highest level of the military region in the Jiangnan district. With his authority, he could directly contact Zhu Zhang, who was the highest commander of the Jiangnan region. Not long after, the call was connected. Bien Junwoo explained the situation at his end to Zhu Zhang. "We need support. There are hundreds of thousands of zombies outside our current location, and they have completely surrounded the shelter we're in." "Really? Has the problem in Tianhai City become so serious?" The scene shifted to 11 minutes earlier at the Jiangnan district headquarters in Blizzard City. This city, which was covered by huge gray walls, was snowing heavily. The outer wall of the command center was made of thick bulletproof glass. so that the people in the high rooms can clearly see the scenery of Blizzard City. In front of the glass wall stood a soldier in his 50s, and with an upright posture, he was wearing a brown trench coat, and underneath it was a green military uniform, which had a shining general star on the shoulder. His gray hair was combed meticulously, and his face was as firm as a sharp knife, with his eyes as sharp as an eagle. He was the highest commander of the Jiangnan district, Commander Zhu Zheng. After receiving the report from Bian Junwu a day ago, Zhu Zheng's face showed a serious expression. I don't know how Bian Junwu's team is doing in dealing with the zombies in Tianhai City. Why haven't they returned yet? But at this moment, a call came through from his satellite phone, interrupting his thoughts. It was a call from Bian Junwu. So as Commander Zhu Zheng picked up the call, Bian Junwu gave him a status update about their current situation. After receiving an affirmative reply, Commander Zhu Zheng was surprised that the problem in Tianhai City had become so serious that Bian Junwu and his team, for the first time, needed their support. Tianhai City is only more than 300 kilometers away from Blizzard City. Once the zombie crisis there breaks out, it will affect Blizzard City in a few days. At the beginning, Zhu Zheng did not take the so-called zombies seriously. He only sent one of his most elite investigation teams to solve the problem there. But he didn't expect that Bian Junwu and the others to be trapped in that place, that they even needed to ask for help from headquarters. He knew that the 7 people in that team are all first-class mutants in Blizzard City. Wait a minute. Zhu Zheng said this and turned to the back of the command room. There was a huge display screen on the wall. He said calmly, "Pull up the scene around the shelter of Radiant Prosperity Base." The artificial intelligence quickly pulled up the satellite image of that area. In the video, zombies gathered like ants on the vast snowfield, and the area was 10 kilometers in radius. After counting, the artificial intelligence gave a specific number. The number of zombies in the picture was 395,861. Among them, there are 395,521 humanoid zombies and 340 large zombies. Zhu Zheng was stunned. Such a number of zombies is like a huge army for war. Even if missiles are used for attack, it may be difficult to eliminate this large number of zombies in such a large area. Zhu Zheng's expression was very solemn. The seriousness of the situation was beyond his imagination. He picked up the satellite phone and said to Bian Junwu, "There are too many zombies, and it would take hundreds of missiles to kill them all." Bian Junwu heard Zhu Zheng's words and immediately understood what he meant at the other end. You see, missiles were also strategic weapons for large military regions. At present, it was almost impossible for one arsenal to even be produced. So one less missile is one less. Zhu Zheng can't use a large number of missiles to eliminate hundreds of thousands of zombies. To eliminate so many zombies, the most effective way is to use the God of Death of Love. The shelter of Radiant Prosperity Base is located 172 meters underground, and its defense was very strong. I plan to launch the God of Love directly to that place. In this way, this wave of zombies can be completely eliminated. Zhu Zheng decided to launch the Doomsday Weapon attack there without hesitation. Bian Junwu's pupils shrank a little under his sunglasses when he heard this. But if that happens, the entire Tianhai City will become a wasteland. Zhu Zheng said coldly, "Aren't there only a few living people in Tianhai City? Sacrificing a small number of people now to prevent the zombie crisis from spreading to other cities is the most effective means at present." Bian Junwu knew that what Zhu Zheng said was right. Currently, there may be only tens of thousands of living people in Tianhai City. Launching the God of Love is undoubtedly the wisest way. However, the problem is that wherever the God of Death of Love passes, radioactive gas will remain in the air for nearly 20 years until it disappears, which means they had to stay in the underground shelter for nearly 20 years. Bian Junwu and his men have no way to leave the shelter and return to the ground. And in the shelter, those supplies will not last for 20 years. So this meant that they were going to die in a sunlightless underground. Bian Junwu knew that he could not rely on the region at this time. "Zhu Zheng, please give us some time. I want to try again for one last time." Zhu Zheng heard this and was silent for a moment before whispering, "Okay, I'll give you some time. After 24 hours, if you can't solve the zombie tide, then I will deploy the Death of Love." Zhu Zheng knew that if Bian Junwu and the local forces of Tianhai City could not solve the zombie problem within 24 hours, then giving them more time would be meaningless. As the highest commander of the Jiangnan region, he would not be so soft-hearted as to allow a possible crisis to spread to the entire Jiangnan region for the sake of a few subordinates, or even the whole country. Bian Junwu ended the call, and his face remained expressionless, which made Xiao Honglian and the others anxious, wondering what the result of the inquiry was. In her anxious state, Xiao Honglian asked Bian Junwu, "What did the region say? When will the missile support arrive?" She now placed all her hopes on the assistance of the Jiangnan region. Bien Junwoo glanced at her and replied coldly, "The news from the headquarters is that there are too many zombies, so they've decided to use the death of love to eliminate them." Hearing Bien Junwoo's words, everyone around him widened their eyes and couldn't help but shout simultaneously, "What?" The death of love, also known as the Doomsday Weapon, is a forbidden weapon before the end of the world. Its power is extremely strong, but it will bring radiation effects to any piece of land it hits, turning it to a complete wasteland. So if Tianhai City is hit, directly or indirectly, by the death of love, it wouldn't matter if everyone in the shelter survives. Because the moment they step outside, they would die shortly after due to the existence of the radiation. How could this happen? Isn't this asking us to die underground? Xiao Honglian raised her angry eyebrows and shouted. Facing Xiao Honglian's anger, Bien Junwoo just said calmly, "At this time, anger is meaningless. We must find a way to deal with the zombies outside. Otherwise, we can only live underground until the supplies run out." He raised his wrist, revealing a black platinum Rolex watch. There are still 23 hours and 58 minutes before the death of love comes. Bien Junwoo didn't care about Xiao Honglian's emotions. After all, if anger was useful, then he would have been more angry than anyone else present. Xiao Honglian also quickly realized this problem, took a few deep breaths and tried to keep her emotions calm. None of them had the luxury of that anyway, and they needed to unite to solve the zombie crisis outside. Bien Junwoo said to Xiao Honglian, "Now, I need you to give me all the information in the shelter immediately, especially the weapons and equipment." Then he looked at Meng Xiu. "Xiaoyu, tell the other families everything about this matter. We have to let them know that if they don't do their best to help this time, everyone will be in dire straits." Meng Xiu nodded. "Yes, boss." Of course she knew that every bit of combat power was extremely important now. Bien Junwoo then pushed his frog mirror sunglasses and continued. "And we have to tell them that anyone who dares to escape will be hunted down endlessly by the Jiangnan region. Zhang Yi, Xing Tian, Wei Dinghai and the Snow Worship Sect must be tied to their chariots." But at this moment, the scene shifts to Zhang Yixian, who was in thoughts with his eyes closed and arms folded. At this point, his emotions were even more complicated. Obviously, the tide of corpses was a monster created by them. However, with the current situation, it was a bit difficult to reverse. And they couldn't perfectly solve it either because it took a considerable amount of effort to get in touch with the corpse king through the bloodvine, and then control the entire group of corpses. With such a complicated information, it needed to be conveyed in a simple manner. Otherwise, it would be difficult for the corpse king to understand with its level of wisdom and intelligence. Also, letting the tide of corpses retreat like this will obviously easily arouse the suspicion of other forces. But just when Zhang Yixian was hesitating, he received a message from Meng Xiu. And after reading it, his expression turns pale. Love death? In 24 hours, the death of love would struck the entire Tianhai city. What he feared the most was eventually set in motion. The Jiangnan region, which had an absolute advantage in military force, could indeed easily wipe out all of them. Damn it! Zhang Yixian, who had always been relatively calm, was at this moment gritting his teeth in anger. He couldn't even help but hit the side of the car he sat nearest to. This must not happen. In 24 hours, what can I do to keep the members of the investigation team alive, make the tide of zombies retreat, and not arouse anyone's suspicion? He was in a dilemma, so with his brows furrowed, Zhang Yixian's eyes flashed with a sharp light, as if he wanted to kill someone. Meanwhile, in the direction of Lujiang district, Zhang Yi and his team were also on their way when he received this news from Meng Xiu. Zhang Yi's eyes were a little surprised at first, but he soon began to smile brightly. That's right, instead of being afraid of the upcoming god of love, he smiled. Because all this, although it was different from what he expected, was generally not much different from what he planned. On the contrary, the existence of the death of love accelerated the progress of things. I wonder what the people of the Snow Worship Sect will do after they learn of the threat from the god of love. I'm sure they must have a way to influence the zombie tide, so they dare not let the investigation team die here. However, they must abandon these hundreds of thousands of zombies, which was their greatest asset. And once this wave of zombies is killed, at least in a short period of time, they will not be able to cultivate a large number of powerful zombies. Then we will have a chance to kill them. But Zhang Yi raised his head and looked at the sky. Indistinctly, he seemed to see a death god holding a sickle falling from the sky and destroying everything. It's still a bit scary after all. The combat uniform does have some anti-radiation functions, and it is not a problem to resist low radiation intensity for a short period of time. He also has to make the worst plan. His alternate space is not suitable for living things to survive inside, but it is still no problem to hide for a short time. The time is about 1 minute, which Zhang Yi has tested personally. If he really senses that thing falling from the sky, Zhang Yi can take people to hide inside temporarily. Escape the initial impact. Although it is not known whether it will work, it is at least a method that can be tried. The only prerequisite is that they cannot be in the central area of the descent. Zhang Yi took out a satellite phone and reminded Zhou Kier and the others who were still in the shelter. Kier, take the other people in the shelter and escape to the basement immediately, the third underground floor. Tianhai City may be hit. He also told the news to everyone in the car. And after the other three heard the news, their expressions became very nervous. Even though they were all extraordinary people facing this level of attack, they would be no different from ordinary people. And there was a high probability that they would all die. Liang Yu frowned and tightly grasped the steering wheel. She said nothing, thinking about how things had quickly developed. Chunlei, on the other hand, turned pale with fear. He placed his hands on his head and started shouting. It's over, it's over. This time I'm really going to die. Boss, how about we run away? 24 hours is enough for us to run out of Tianhai City. Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi turned his head slightly in his direction and said lightly, "Oh, by the way, there is one more thing. They said that if we dare to run, we will be hunted down by the Jiangnan district in all directions without dead ends. Now, don't you think that the zombie tide is more terrible than the Jiangnan district?" Chunlei's face was ashen. Obviously, either of these two things can make him die without a burial place. Fighting with zombies, there is still a 50% chance of survival. But being targeted by the Jiangnan district, there is no chance of survival. After all, as long as the Jiangnan district wants them dead, they can always find them easily by determining their location through the powerful satellite monitoring system and network system. Isn't this embarrassing? Chunlei said this bitterly. Do we really have 24 hours left to deal with this? Uncle Yu sighed solemnly. Hundreds of thousands of zombies. How can that be done easily? Even if it is 300,000 pigs, we can't catch them all in 24 hours. Knowing that Tianhai City would suffer a devastating blow in less than a day, almost everyone was very nervous. Leaning back in his seat, Zhang Yi lowered his eyelids and said leisurely, "Don't worry. There is a solution to this zombie crisis. As long as we know that the Snow Worship Sect is behind the zombies, then things will become much simpler. They didn't expect me to expose the location where they hid the corpses, and they must be in a mess now. But the trouble that comes next will not be ours, but theirs." Zhang Yi was not panicked at all. He knew that there must be a way to solve this zombie crisis. It depends on how the Snow Worship Sect handles it. After all, they don't want to be destroyed by the god of love before they are about to fulfill their ambitions. A dark light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Everything is developing as planned, and it has not exceeded his guess. Now, it depends on whether the next event can achieve the effect he wants. Back inside the shelter at Radiant Prosperity Base, it seems that the shelter was naturally not just a bunker. As a fortress prepared for wartime, it also has a powerful self-defense system and powerful armed forces such as automatic machine guns. Bian Junwu, Xiao Honglian and the others gathered around. And in front of them was a huge electronic information map. They began to formulate a plan to break out. Although it is extremely difficult to annihilate the zombie army of more than 300,000, there is still a chance, because those who survived are all top elites. Soon, a temporary plan was formulated. If you want to eliminate the zombies, the most important thing is to destroy their command center, that is, the Zombie King. But this time, we disturbed the zombies and they took the initiative to attack. Bian Junwu pointed to Aoshan District on the map and said to everyone, "The Corpse King must be behind the zombies. So we must break out, confirm the location of the Corpse King, and kill him. The zombies are not so scary after losing their command. But how do we break out?" Xiao Honglian asked. "There are too many zombies. We can't do it with the firepower we have." Indeed, it was as she said. Among the zombies, there are a large number of bronze-armored zombies with combat power comparable to that of mutants. So even if Bian Junwu and his people can deal with a few of them by themselves, there are hundreds more. And flying ones too. Bian Junwu pushed his dark frog-shaped sunglasses and said calmly, "It seems we have to rely on that guy." And as he said this, a shadow of Zhang Yi emerged in his mind. Wu Di gritted his teeth, knowing who exactly his boss was implying. "I didn't expect that we would have to rely on that guy to save us at the critical moment." At this moment, Zhang Yi's vehicle had not yet reached Radiant Prosperity Base. His satellite phone suddenly rang, and the number displayed on the caller ID was Bian Junwu. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows, and the others looked over curiously. He knew that everyone was curious about the situation at Radiant Prosperity Base, so he turned on the loudspeaker when he took the call. "Captain Bian, are you okay now?" Bian Junwu's cold voice came from the phone. "It's okay now, but there is not much time left for all of us. Listen, Zhang Yi, don't rush to come to support now, go to the beach first. And use your ability to collect a lot of seawater. Zhang Yi and the others looked at each other and understood Bian Zhenwu's plan. Facing hundreds of thousands of zombies, they did not have large-scale weapons to effectively reduce their number at the very least. But, with a large amount of seawater used as a weapon, its lethality was great in this current weather. And once most zombies are immersed in seawater, their movements will be greatly affected, and they will even be difficult to pose a threat to humans. Moreover, after a large amount of seawater is released onto the land, it will freeze in a short time. There is no doubt that this was a very useful method to deal with them. You want to take advantage of the extremely low temperature, release the seawater onto the land, and use the frozen seawater to weaken the zombies' mobility. Zhang Yi did not hesitate and continued with an affirmative reply that he got it. They should wait for him for 4 hours. He immediately asked Liang Yu to turn the car around and drive towards the East China Sea. Meanwhile, Xing Tian and the others were asked by Bian Zhenwu to wait far away from Radiant Prosperity Base. They had to wait until everyone was ready before launching an attack on the zombies. The most important thing in this process was the seawater brought by Zhang Yi. 4 hours passed slowly, and every second of every minute was a torment for the people in the shelter. The people from the several major forces were also very nervous. They were very afraid of the arrival of the god of death of love. Especially Zhang Yixian, he was extremely entangled at this moment. He couldn't understand how the investigation team managed to find the zombies hidden by them. And now, a choice needed to be made. Either abandon the zombies in exchange for the trust of the Jiangnan district, so that there will be a chance to use the blood vine to slowly cultivate another batch of zombies, and strengthen their strength in the future. Or fight to the death and kill everyone in Tianhai City, including the investigation team. Obviously, the second approach was irrational. Not to mention the people hiding in the shelter. It would be difficult to break through and kill them in a short time with the zombies attack method. Also, it was extremely stupid to face the wrath of the Jiangnan district. Therefore, Zhang Yixian had to make the sad choice of abandoning the zombies to save the king. He would do nothing and let the zombies attack based on their instincts. And although it was painful for him, it was their only way. We have to act more realistically so that they can't find out that the zombies are controlled by us. Zhang Yixian remained seated in his vehicle, staring in the direction of Radiant Prosperity Base with cold eyes. He watched the dense group of zombies at a distance and became a bit resolved. Bian Zhenwu and his team were not waste, and they shouldn't die so easily. On the other hand, Zhang Yi and his team had spent more than 4 hours. And finally, they brought enough seawater from the seaside. He contacted Bian Zhenwu and told him the news. The seawater is ready, but we have to find a commanding height and then dump all of it. Don't have too much hope for the effect. It can only affect the formation of the zombies and slow down their movements. But the surroundings of the base were all flat land, and it is unlikely to completely submerge them. Bian Zhenwu replied from the other end, "That's enough. It just need to buy us some time to break through. Only by breaking through first can we find the zombie king as an intelligent body and behead it. After killing the zombie king, the threat of the zombie group will be greatly reduced." And according to their search and analysis, it can be concluded that this was the last batch of zombies in Tianhai City. Not considering the people who secretly manipulated everything, at least after this battle, Tianhai City will not be troubled by zombies in the short term. Bian Zhenwu's eyes were cold. He had made up his mind that after this zombie crisis, he would find the mastermind behind it all, the person who has the ability to control such a large group of corpses, and either let the person become a member of the Jiangnan region, or eliminate such person if there is any resistance. After Zhang Yi ended the call, he asked Liang Yu to drive towards the high point near Radiant Prosperity Base. Hearing this, she simply showed that he understands without uttering a word. A few minutes after, they made their way towards such area, and from a distance they could see a huge group of corpses a few kilometers away. A large black mass, and with just one look would make people feel fear. Fortunately, they were far enough away, and the attention of the corpses was still attracted by the shelter in the base. Otherwise, if they chased over at this time, it would also bring Zhang Yi and his team a lot of trouble. Bian Zhenwu had contacted Xing Tian and the others to prepare for the battle. Once Zhang Yi started pouring seawater, the people in the shelter would start to fight back and try to break out. And at that time, they would need to create chaos outside to cover the investigation team and distract the core group combat forces around the base. So the 3 leaders from the other forces have already taken their positions nearby, just waiting for Bian Zhenwu's orders, and they would launch a disruptive attack on the corpses outside. Although there are not many people left in the major forces, those who may have survived until now were all elites, so this task was not an inconvenience for them. Nearly half of them were captain-level mutants. Zhang Yi and his team stood to a cliff 4 kilometers away from the base. and looking down at the zombie scene there, Zhang Yi opened 2 huge dimensional doors. The next moment, 2 turbulent streams of water gushed out and poured down. Zhang Yi turned his head slightly towards his team with a smile. "Are you guys ready?" he said. Hearing this, the 3, with a resolved determination, nodded in unison that they are. The seawater flowed down from the cliff and immediately turned into 2 glaciers. There were many white ice flowers in the turbulent seawater, and then it flowed towards the flat land around Radiant Prosperity Base. Although these were all seawater taken from the deep sea area, and the salt content was very high, but even so, the surfaces of the seawater that quickly left the double doors quickly formed ice flowers after coming into contact with the air at -60 degrees. The roar of the seawater attracted the attention of some zombies. But when they turned around to look, they were immediately submerged by the surging seawater. Many others also turned around and roared at Zhang Yi and his team on the cliff. At this time, they were not actually commanded, so they didn't have the slightest intelligence, wisdom, or whatsoever. These batch of zombies were deliberately left dormant by Zhang Yi, so they only had the instinct to kill living people. Therefore, when they saw Zhang Yi and his team, a large number of zombies immediately rushed in their direction, heading directly towards the surging seawater. However, this mindless charge could not bring any threat to Zhang Yi and his team. Zhang Yi also discovered that the zombies were not as smart as in the previous actions. They did not even hide or avoid the turbulent seawater, which of course could not have any effect. Soon a large number of zombies were directly swallowed by the seawater. And in conjunction with it, the formation of the zombie tide was completely disrupted, like pushing down dominoes, causing the zombies to start chaos from the back. Zhang Yi couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth. "Sure enough, it's really true. I knew that you, Yuan Konga and Zhang Yi, wouldn't dare to fight to the death." Zhang Yi laughed. Then he dusted off his hands in a satisfied manner. "You guys should just reveal your cards here," he thought. The seawater quickly submerged a large number of zombies. Tens of thousands of them. However, in this moment, they were still struggling desperately to rush towards Zhang Yi. But due to the surging seawater, they had no ability to move at all. Bian Junwu saw this scene through the satellite and immediately gave the order. "Begin the attack." The ground suddenly shook at the shelter. Then, cracks appeared on the ground, followed by dozens of cannons of various calibers which slowly floated up. Accompanied with a loud, continuous sounds of gunfire, the machine guns began to spew out flames and fired at the direction where the zombies were most densely packed. The large caliber artillery roared, and the shells exploded in the zombies, taking away hundreds of them in an instant. Xing Tian, Wei Dinghai, Zhang Yi and the others also responded to Bian Junwu's call and launched attacks on the zombies from 3 different directions. The main attack methods are supernatural powers and explosives. After all, ordinary caliber firearms were useless against them. At this time, Wei Dinghai's ability played a great role. His Ice and Snow Lord was a powerful ability that combines offense and defense. But in fact, as an old sailor, he is best at sea combat. In an environment with ice and seawater, his ability is easier to play. Now that Zhang Yi has released a large amount of seawater, which has turned into a surging glacier on the snowfield, just created an excellent combat environment for him. Ice Age. Wei Dinghai controlled the surging glacier with both hands and turned it into his weapon. Then, he controlled it to attack the bronze-armored corpses in the corpse group. If the bronze-armored corpses are divided according to the standards of mutants, they are all under the strengthening type mutant. They just have powerful strength, defense, and speed. But facing this form of attack, they are also difficult to resist. After the surging icy sea water engulfed them, they began to freeze rapidly in the water flow and could not stand firmly on the ground. The 4 major forces outside joined forces and attacked the zombies by surprise. In just a few minutes, nearly 1/3 of the zombies were defeated. However, when the zombies discovered their position, this good battle situation was difficult to maintain. Because the attack using the glacier only disrupted the formation of the zombies, but could not kill them directly. After all, the gap in numbers was evident. If it took too long, the seawater will be released, and the zombies will be able to adjust their status and counterattack them. Zhang Yi said to Bian Junwu, "It's impossible to stay outside for too long. You must get out quickly." "I understand." Bian Junwu knew that this advantage was only temporary. They were also ready to break out. There were still thousands of people in the shelter, most of whom were the original workers of the refinery and their families. But they couldn't be taken along this time, so they could only stay. If Bian Junwu and his team wins, these people could survive. However, if Bian Junwu and his team loses, these people would have to live underground for the rest of their lives. But that was better than going out immediately and being eaten brutally by the zombies. "Get ready to break out. Pour out all the firepower," Bian Junwu ordered. A cruel smile crept on the lips of Xiao Honglian as she commented lightly, "We only have one chance. Since we want to pursue excitement, then we must carry it through to the end." She walked to the console, opened a secret compartment of the console, found a button that was hidden very deeply, and then smashed it hard with her fist. The next moment, above the shelter of Radiant Prosperity Base, the huge refinery erupted with earth-shaking flames. Then, accompanied with a deafening explosion, the dazzling light illuminated the entire sky. The fiery red light hurt everyone's eyes, and the deafening sound made Zhang Yi feel like he was going to lose his hearing. From above the earth, a mushroom-shaped cloud slowly rose into the sky. The whole earth was shaking. Even though it was several kilometers away, the shaking felt like a magnitude 9 earthquake, making Zhang Yi and the others unstable. "Oh my god!" Zhang Yi widened his eyes and looked at everything in front of him in disbelief. Xiao Honglian, she actually detonated the refinery. It is said that there are millions of barrels of crude oil stored under the refinery, which is the foundation of Xiao Honglian's dominance in Tianhai City. But now, she actually detonated them. The terrifying hot wind blew around, and at least 82,000 zombies were burned to ashes or charred corpses by the thousands of degrees of high temperature. Fortunately, Zhang Yi and his team were all wearing high-temperature resistant combat uniforms. Otherwise, he felt that he would definitely be severely burned. "She is so cruel." Zhang Yi couldn't help but sigh. Xiao Honglian is a woman who is cruel to others, and even crueler to herself. Although this approach is the most sensible at the moment, not everyone has this courage. The explosion did not end. After the first wave of explosions, there were a series of subsequent explosions. The huge flames swept around and turned the glacier into a lake again. The ice and snow on the surrounding land were also melted. The river was boiling hot, and the zombies in it were drifting with the waves, making miserable wails in their throats. The virus living in their bodies was not resistant to high temperatures and quickly inactivated and died. Zhang Yi and the others hurriedly retreated. The shock wave of the explosion was too strong and they dared not approach. After more than 10 minutes, the momentum of the explosion subsided, but the flames were still burning. The surrounding area turned into a huge swamp, and it was a boiling swamp. This explosion caused the zombie group to lose more than half of their number directly and indirectly. Back inside the shelter, everyone, including Bian Junwu, was absolutely stunned by Xiao Honglian's action. And as she stares at the screen displayed, Xiao Honglian's eyes flashed with crazy light. This time, all the crude oil hidden in the oil depot was scrapped. However, no one knew that there was more than one oil depot in Radiant Prosperity Base. After all, not everyone puts all their eggs in one basket. Xiao Honglian had also hid 500,000 barrels of crude oil in other places. Otherwise, how could she destroy the foundation of Radiant Prosperity Base so easily? This move was a heroic act, something she had to do in order to seek a way out. And that's it. Bian Junwu and the members of the investigation team were dumbfounded. None of them thought that Xiao Honglian had such a destructive trick up her sleeve. And not just having it, but to be able to go through with it. They were a little more awe in their hearts for the leader of Radiant Prosperity Base. Not only admiration, but also courage and a bit of fear. Bian Junwu even gave her a salute and a title. Caption Xiao, a woman of unbelievable courage. If a person can be so cruel to himself, what about others? Xiao Honglian walked towards the gate of the shelter first and signaled for the rest to follow. "Let's go, we have to take advantage of the chaos among the zombies and get out quickly. But there is already a vast ocean outside. How can we leave?" Meng Xiu asked behind her. "If we swim over, we will become targets of those bronze-armored flying corpses in the water." Xiao Honglian gritted her teeth. "No matter how dangerous it is, we have to try. Now is the best opportunity." No one expected that the outside would become a swamp. But even if you think of it, you have to do it. Yi Kong, a blasting expert and mechanic in the investigation team, took a few steps forward. "We can temporarily assemble a speedboat and rush over." Zhuge Qingting asked quickly, "Is it feasible?" "We don't have much time," Yi Kong said calmly and quickly. "As long as you cooperate with me, give me what I need and some manpower, there will be no problem." Zhuge Qingting was on board when he heard this. Bian Junwu glanced at his watch, and then at the situation outside. "You have to complete this task within 15 minutes. Although the explosion destroyed half of the zombies on the snowfield covered a large area. As a result, the zombies in the outer circle were less affected. And the zombies in the water were also slowly crawling ashore. It won't be long before they will surround the lake around Radiant Prosperity Base. By then, it won't be so easy to run. Don't worry, boss. It will be done in 10 minutes at most." Yi Kong just quickly rolled up his sleeves, said lightly, and walked quickly to the back. He immediately started dismantling all the stuffs he requested. But at the moment, Zhang Yi's voice reached Bien Junwoo's ears. "How is it, are you guys coming out?" Bien Junwoo picked up his satellite phone and replied, "We will come out soon, Zhang Yi, you have good marksmanship. Help me snipe those flies in the sky." At the other end of the line, Zhang Yi looked over from a distance, and the zombies had not given up the siege on the people in the shelter. Hundreds of huge copper-armored flying corpses vibrated their wings, hovered above the lake, and screamed shrilly. The fire in the refinery continued to burn, and explosions were heard from time to time. Although the explosion was not as terrible as at the beginning, judging from the current fire, it would take a long while before it's extinguished. Zhang Yi then took out the anti-material sniper rifle from his alternate space. With Zhang Yi's precision shooting ability and special armor-piercing bullets, the investigating team didn't need to worry about its lack of firepower as support. Zhang Yi sighed lightly. "If I do this, my position will be exposed eventually. However, for the sake of our friendship, I will do this." Bien Junwoo was an extremely important part of Zhang Yi's plan, so of course Zhang Yi had to help him. 10 minutes later, Yijikong finally modified a simple assault boat. The tools used were truck compartments, tires, and engines. This assault boat can only carry less than 12 people, and Bien Junwoo immediately allocated the quota. 7 people from the investigation team must go out, and there were also Xiao Honglian, Zhuge Qingting, and their 2 mutant captains. After the preparations were completed, Bailey Chongqing directly carried the assault boat to the front door. Bien Junwoo shouted to the several forces outside, "We are going to rush over. You are ready to cover." The families on the periphery responded quickly that they got it. They should just come out. Everything was ready, and Xiao Honglian opened the 7-layer alloy door of the shelter. The door slowly opened, and a heat wave suddenly hit the inside of the door. Although they were wearing high-temperature resistant protective clothing, they still felt the burning breath. This was the only way. The entire refinery was burning, and there was a sea of burning out fire. But the only good news was that the zombies around had died. Bailey Chongqing carried the speedboat and threw it into the water, and then less than a dozen people jumped on it. With all the 11 people on board, Yijikong, who assembled the speedboat himself, was obviously the one driving it. He started the engine, and the propeller under the water turned rapidly, taking them to the other side. The area near the base was already a huge swamp, and the area within a radius of approximately 8 kilometers was full of hot lake water. It was even bubbling out. After the speedboat rushed out of the range of the entrance of the shelter, the copper-armored flying corpses that had been waiting in the air all this while immediately swooped down with a howl. Bien Junwoo raised the black gun in his hand and calmly aimed at the bronze-armored flying corpse in the sky. Qi Guangming also followed suit. However, even with a special weapon, it was difficult for them to cause substantial damage to the bronze-armored flying corpse. Everyone on the speedboat was also fighting back. With each of them being a powerful mutant, it was quite easy to deal with a few copper-armored flying corpses around them. But the problem was their number. One even got close to Bien Junwoo, but just when it got within a striking distance, a loud noise suddenly came from a distance, and the copper-armored flying corpse fell from the air as if it was hit by a heavy hammer on the head. Zhang Yi calmly changed the bullets of his sniper rifle at the commanding height, and then continued to lock the area above the speedboat. Wu Di, although not a sharpshooter, noticed Zhang Yi and didn't want him in the spotlight, saving them again. So he also tried to shoot the bronze-armored flying corpses with a sniper rifle on the boat. However, he was not a space-based mutant and could not handle the huge recoil brought by the heavy sniper rifle. So when he fired, the whole boat would shake. Bailey Chongqing calmly grabbed his shoulder. "You're really not good at this. Don't use the sniper rifle. It's not convenient on the boat." Wu Di had no choice but to ditch the rifle to fight back. There were hundreds of bronze-armored flying corpses in the air, and they flew at an extremely fast speed. Except for snipers like Zhang Yi, who had the ability to lock their heads, the abilities of other mutants were not very useful at this time. After all, they were in the water, and it was good enough to be able to exert 50% of their abilities. But then, bigger troubles came. Just as they were concentrating on dealing with the enemy in the air, huge waves began to form in the nearby waters. The speedboat suddenly stopped moving forward. It seemed to have been hit by some huge resistance, just like a small boat sailing into a seaweed bush, and it was difficult to move forward. It turned out that many zombies submerged by the flood were not dead. To be precise, they were dead things, so they just stayed under the water. Now that the speedboat appeared, they instinctively chased after it and clung to it one by one. The zombies below pulled one after another, and there was no telling how many zombies were in the water, climbing up along the bodies of other zombies. No wonder the speedboat was subjected to such great resistance. Yijikong gritted his teeth and increased the horsepower. The propeller made a crackling sound, crushing the zombies behind. The speedboat moved forward with difficulty, but there were more zombies underwater in front. When they moved forward and closed in on the distance to the land on the other side of the lake, they saw that there were countless zombies staring at them, waiting for them to come over. Among them, there were the powerful bronze-armored zombies. At this time, Zhang Yi, Xingtian, Wei Dinghai and the others were also trying their best to clean up the zombies and attract their attention. But the external aid forces were also besieged by zombies. At this point, they still had to rely on their own strength. "We can only fight." Wu Di gritted his teeth and raised his right hand, and a huge ball of light condensed in his palm. At the same time, dozens of huge balls of light appeared around his body. The floating gun was indeed a very powerful ability, but it also has a big flaw. And that was, it consumes not only superpowers but also mental power. If used too much, it will cause irreparable injuries to Wu Di's body. In the end, he might just become a living dead with only an empty shell. Seeing that Wu Di was going to fight to the death, Bian Junwu immediately reached out and pressed his shoulder. "Put away your floating gun. It's not your turn to fight to the death now." Wu Di's body froze, and he suddenly shouted angrily, "With such a large group of corpses, if I use my ability to open up a path, how can we survive? Don't tell me that you are going to use your life to open up a path for us." Among the investigation team, Bian Junwu and Wu Di had the most similar abilities. They both have large-scale, high-damage abilities, and they need to pay the price of their health when using their abilities. However, even if they reach the shore, there are still hundreds of thousands of zombies waiting for them. It is a difficult situation to deal with. Bian Junwu pushed his dark sunglasses and knew that he had to do something. With their current situation, Bian Junwu thought of no other way other than to use his ability. He reached for his sunglasses, but unexpectedly, the deputy captain, Bailey Chongqing, was quick to grab his arm and tried to dissuade him. "Boss, please don't be impatient. Don't you see the scale of these zombies? Even if you use Nirvana, it's impossible to kill your way out in one go. And it is obvious that these zombies are more ferocious than the ones we encountered before." After thinking it over, Bian Junwu lowered his arm. His face was cold with a hint of gloom. Bailey Chongqing was right, he thought. His ability was indeed strong, but he was only a Delta-level mutant and could not create miracles. With his power of destruction close to that of Epsilon, and the number of uses being limited, not using his ability in any little difficulty they encounter would be the right choice. After all, there were also a huge side effect to consider. Otherwise, Bian Junwu would definitely be able to kill a way out of the army of hundreds of thousands of zombies in an instant. "Anyway, let's go ashore first." Deputy Captain Bailey Chongqing spoke to Bian Junwu directly as he still remained silent, in thoughts. Everyone knew what to do now, and the water was definitely not their home ground. So, upon hearing the vice captain's words, everyone took out their weapons and started shooting at the zombies in and under the water. Fortunately, the zombies did not move quickly in the water, and the speedboat was not overturned. The peripheral forces were also in communication with Bian Junwu, so they knew their current situation. But at this moment ashore, Wei Dinghai and Xingtian were really powerless. They themselves were also besieged by a large number of zombies and could not do anything. But Zhang Yi, on the other hand, had a worried expression when he saw the current situation the investigation team were in. And with the zombies not under his control, the situation was becoming more and more problematic. If he wanted to control the zombies, he had to return to the Sect's headquarters and let a fellow member, Shueteng, give orders to the Corpse King. However, it was definitely too late to do so now. And if the 7-man investigation team were to turn over here, the result would not be something he was willing to bear. "Damn it," he cursed silently. "Couldn't you have just gone back after we all dramatically dealt with the zombies? You have to stay here and cause trouble. You asked for all this." Zhang Yixian's face was calm, but inwardly, his anxiousness was growing exponentially. However, he had no choice now, and could only say to his fellow priests, "We must do our best to rescue the members of the investigation team. At the very least, save the life of their captain." More than a dozen mutants from the Snow Worship Sect fought hard, trying to break through the zombies, and open up a path to Bian Junwu and the others on the speedboat. But it was too difficult. The ordinary zombies were easy to deal with, but the hundreds of bronze-armored zombies in the zombie group were the problem. After the numerous encounters, it was pretty obvious that an average mutant could not go toe-to-toe with the bronze-armored zombies. But due to Zhang Yixian's radical behavior at the moment, 5 of his priests had just died in the hands of the bronze-armored zombies. They died being brutally torn to pieces by them. But at this moment, Zhang Yixian, with cold eyes, didn't care about it, not even a little, because in his eyes, they were a waste. Fortunately, he thought maliciously, after they die, their superpowers would return to Yuan Konga's body. Otherwise, it would be a shame for those superpowers to have been wasted away. Meanwhile, at this same time on the cliff, Zhang Yi had observed enough and decided to finally join the fray. He told Uncle Yu to drive and the rest to get in the car. They were going to have some fun playing with the zombies. Inside, his instructions were to circle around the area of the fighting people below to attract the zombies. Shortly after, the plan was carried out successfully, because a few distance behind them were dense zombies, chasing. And judging from the number, there must be at least tens of thousands of them. They roared and ran on the snow. But even if they have no brains and have broken through the limits of the human body, they are still flesh and blood after all. How can two legs catch up with four wheels? What's more, it's on the snow. Zhang Yi and the other two, Liang Yu and Chunlei, leaned out of the window. And as Zhang Yi sniped the zombies chasing them, Chunlei and Liang Yu used grenades. After throwing them out, the zombies didn't dodge at all and rushed over directly. When they did, many of them were quickly blown to pieces. After he also sniped the flying and regular bronze-armored zombies in the zombie group, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Unexpectedly, when he saw the zombies charging mindlessly, he knew they were more ferocious and much weaker than the ones they encountered in their previous battle. Also, they were more stupid. Sure enough, without the control of the snow worship sect, they had returned to their most primitive state. However, how are they going to solve the current situation? Is Yuan Konga and Zhang Yi just going to let the members of the investigation team die here? Impossible. They must have other ways to get them out at the very least. Although he didn't know how they controlled the zombies, he was sure that they would find a way to destroy the zombies before the 24 hours run out. But unfortunately for Zhang Yi, he absolutely guessed wrong about this aspect of the matter. Because although Yuan Konga and Zhang Yi did have a way to control the zombies at first, but now it was too late to use this method. So the real situation was more troublesome than Zhang Yi imagined. Of course, this can't be blamed on Zhang Yi. After all, he didn't have any accurate information about the relevant aspects. Meanwhile, on the lake, everyone struggled to defend. The dehydrated corpses in the water were relentless, giving no room for anyone on the boat to relax at all. Also, right on the shore, there were even more terrifying corpses waiting for them, especially those huge copper-armored corpses. One by one, they were baring their fangs and claws and making creepy roars and eerie noises. Zhang Yi saw this scene from a distance and was extremely anxious. He suddenly flew into the air and quickly rushed towards the direction of the speedboat. And not long after, he came to the sky above the speedboat. Everyone saw Zhang Yi and was quite envious of his flying posture. He then made a sturdy landing carefully in order not to rock the boat. Zhang Yi, who can control the force around him, can gain the ability to fly by controlling his body. Zhang Yi, why did you come here by yourself? Xiao Honglian asked. Zhang Yi stared at Bian Junwu and said, the tide of corpses on the periphery is too huge, we can't break through it all. Mr. Bian, let me take you away from here first. No matter what, you have to stop the destruction of Tianhai City by the Jiangnan district. Zhang Yi has completely lost control of the current situation. Well, to be exact, their control over the zombies was not complete when they woke up from their dormant state. Now, he had come to realize they could not control them as they wish at this point. In the current situation, he will be killed if he is not careful. So, in a hurry, he chose to come and take Bian Junwu away, believing that, as long as Bian Junwu is alive, the situation can still be saved. Bian Junwu saw through Zhang Yi's thoughts and replied at once, do you think saving me alone can solve this matter? Don't be so naive, Bian Junwu scolded. Jiangnan district has lost patience with the zombie problem in Tianhai City. If we can't get rid of the zombies within 24 hours, everyone will die here. Do you get it now? Zhang Yi's pupils shrank sharply, his expression like he had seen a ghost. What? How can this be? What a joke. You've got to be joking, right? There are still hundreds of thousands of zombies here, and we have exhausted all our strength. How can we deal with them? Bian Junwu replied coldly. What else can we do? We can only fight for our lives. The expression on Zhang Yi's face was uglier than eating shit, and his facial features were almost twisted together. In his eyes, a sinister and disgusted look flashed. Damn you, Bian Junwu, he cursed loudly in thoughts. You see, from Zhang Yi's perspective, if Bian Junwu and his men had not come to Tianhai City, then their great goal would have been achieved long ago. Back on shore, Zhang Yi and the others could hear the conversation between the two clearly through the communication device of Bian Junwu. Zhang Yi frowned immediately when he heard this. He felt that the situation seemed a little different from what he expected. Zhang Yi's tone was anxious and impatient. He didn't seem to be joking, which was strange. Aren't the zombies controlled by them? Could it be that he was reluctant to sacrifice these things he cultivated with great effort, and was deliberately acting? Then, suddenly, with a shocked expression, Zhang Yi turned his head slightly when he heard Wu Di's panicked tone through the communicator. "Captain!" he shouted. A minute ago at the base, the speedboat had made it ashore, and Bian Junwu and the rest, including Zhang Yi, had also made it without any casualties. But immediately when they landed, an unexpected battle broke out, and all kinds of zombies roared and surrounded them. Bian Junwu had taken off his sunglasses and activated his powerful and terrifying ability, turning thousands of zombies around them into ashes in an instant. This also made him cover his mouth and began to cough violently and continuously. Seeing Bian Junwu's current state made Wu Di shout in horror. And as blood started to flow through his fingers, Bian Junwu, sweating bullets, was finding it a bit difficult to stand upright. Wu Di lost it at this moment, and in a fit of rage, he became ruthless, and the floating cannon blasted violently in all directions. Even the copper-armored corpses with the strongest defense had a big hole in their bodies after being touched by the light ball. When Wu Di's violent outburst subsides, a narrow path was created through the hundreds of thousands of zombies surrounding them. "Quick, we have to get out," Bian Junwu said to everyone, enduring the discomfort of his body. At that moment, Zhang Yi used his telekinesis to also disperse the flying bronze-armored zombies in the air. This situation seems not quite right. Liang Yu looked at the zombies behind her and frowned slightly. "The zombies we encountered today are more aggressive than those we encountered before. But we only attracted a small part of the zombies this time. However, there are still hundreds of thousands of zombies surrounding the investigation team. Can they still survive?" Zhang Yi's eyes condensed, and his expression became extremely serious. The situation seemed to be different from what he imagined. His original plan was to use this accident to force the Snow Worship Sect to give up the zombies in their hands. And in this way, even if Yuan Konga has a powerful force, she may not have the confidence to turn against the other four forces. But it was obvious that the situation was heading in a direction that he couldn't guess. However, this current situation was either the people of the Snow Worship Sect had gone crazy and really wanted to wipe out the investigation team and even their families in one fell swoop, or even the Snow Worship Sect couldn't control the zombies. Zhang Yi tended to the latter. He didn't think Yuan Konga or Zhang Yi were the kind of fools who didn't care about the consequences. But right now, how to solve this huge problem is the most important thing. If there is really no other way, I'll go over and show off. When Zhang Yi said this, his eyes flashed with a bright light, but there was a meaningful smile on the corner of his mouth. His teammate, Chunlei, looked in his direction and asked curiously, "Boss, what are you going to do?" Zhang Yi glanced at him and replied, "I'll use the power of the two-dimensional doors to shuttle over and save them." Zhang Yi opened his double doors immediately after. The release range of Zhang Yi's dimensional double doors was 300 meters around himself. Then, within this range, as long as the two doors were opened at the same time, the space shuttle could be completed. Also, the opening of the dimensional double doors was free of consumption and had no cooling time. In other words, as long as Zhang Yi's speed was fast enough, he could achieve instant teleportation effect and reach the vicinity of Bian Junwu and the others within a second. Zhang Yi's words made Chunlei a bit puzzled. He couldn't help but think of how Zhang Yi used his dimensional double doors to lead them to escape the zombies when they first entered the subway. But until now, Zhang Yi had never told any of them the specifics when it comes to using his double doors. None of them knew the distance it could cover, or the duration at which it could last, or whether it can be used multiple times. Basically, they knew nothing. "Why didn't you say so earlier? That way we wouldn't have had so much trouble in the beginning." After listening to Chunlei, he turned in his direction with a smile. "You seem to have misunderstood what I said. When I say save them, it's not the kind of rescue you think." Dumbfounded, Chunlei murmured, "Aren't they both saving? So what's the difference? Doesn't both of them mean using your space shuttle ability of the double doors to bring people out of the zombie tide?" Zhang Yi said lightly, "The last hope given to us by the Jiangnan district was not to ensure that all the members of the investigation team survive, but to eliminate all the zombies in Tianhai City within 24 hours. So, even if I rescue them from the zombies, it's meaningless and can't stop the coming of the god of death of love. Oh, and right at this moment, there's less than 16 hours left until the death of love arrives." The expression of Chunlei suddenly became serious again. "This is impossible," he said. Although Xiao Honglian destroyed hundreds of thousands of zombies by detonating the crude oil within her base, most of the bronze-armored zombies and bronze-armored flying zombies survived. We can't kill all the remaining hundreds of thousands of zombies by ourselves. At this moment, Liang Yu leaned out of the window with a grenade in her hand, and with a serious look, she questioned if perhaps The 24 hours period set at the beginning was just an excuse given to the investigation team. The Jiangnan district judged that we could not solve the problem of the zombie tide at all. Therefore, they had planned to use the god of death of love already. And the 24 hours was just some sort of false hope given to Bian Junwu and his investigation team. After listening to Liang Yu, Chunlei looked at Zhang Yi with trembling eyes and said hopefully, "Boss, let's run away. There is still time, we can leave Tianhai City." Zhang Yi paused, and then a faint smile appeared on his face. "I said if everyone has no way, I will go and show off. This is my last attempt and we still have time at the moment. But if we fail, we will leave immediately." After Zhang Yi finished speaking, he jumped out of the car window. "Boss!" Seeing Zhang Yi disappear through his dimensional door, Chunlei was so scared that he shouted through the car window. Flower's eyes also widened like copper bells when he saw this. He pricked up his ears with an expression full of tension and disbelief. Zhang Yi didn't give them a chance to persuade him and jumped through one dimensional door after the next. In a flash, his figure disappeared in the group of zombies 300 meters away. And before the zombies could react, Zhang Yi's figure flashed towards Bian Junwu and the others again. "It's okay. Even if Zhang Yi's ability can't solve the zombie swarm, he can still escape safely. We will do as he said and wait for him to come back." Uncle Yu said to the others as he picked up a rocket launcher, aimed and fired a fierce shot at the zombie swarm behind. Instantly, a deafening explosion occurred a few meters away, and with it, dozens of zombies were blown away, and their limbs and arms were scattered all over the ground. None of Zhang Yi's teammates knew what he was going to do, because he left in a hurry and did not explain it in detail. But they all believed in him anyway. After everything they've been through together for almost half a year, living under the same roof, they all knew what kind of person he was. Zhang Yi was so steady and his ability was so perverted when it came to protecting his life that it was just simply outrageous. And one thing was also certain about him. Thus, if Zhang Yi was not extremely sure, he would never put himself in danger. So all they could do now was to trust him and try to attract more zombies on the periphery to reduce the pressure there. And speaking of pressure, it seems the pressure the investigation team was facing had not decreased at all. On the land of more than 10 miles around, the zombies had surrounded them densely, and there were also zombies climbing up from the lake with their bodies wet. Zhang Yixin flew in the air, constantly bombarding the zombies with a force, and each force wave could take away dozens of zombies. But this powerful ability was like a drop in an ocean in the face of a huge tide of zombies, and couldn't alleviate the current situation. Not even a little. There was also a group of bronze-armored flying zombies staring at him, constantly coming to attack, and they were all knocked away by his force. Gradually, Zhang Yixin also felt exhausted. He joined the rest on the ground. They stood in a circle with their backs to each other and moved forward with difficulty. It's obvious at this point that Bian Junwu's ability was indeed terrifying, but it was very damaging to his body and could not be activated continuously. Also, with his current condition, using his ability one last time could be his last. So, if that's the case, he needed to only use it to clear a path in a critical moment, and it had to be worth his life. At this moment, everyone knew that once their superpowers were exhausted, they would die there. It seems that this time, I'm really going to die here. Xiao Honglian's demeanor was close to despair, and this always strong woman showed a tired look on her face. However, she didn't have any regrets. Since the end of the world, almost everyone she knew in Tianhai City was dead. Her relatives, friends, and comrades fell beside her one after another. Being able to live until now is already a blessing in a way. A thick haze enveloped everyone, and the feeling of despair was even stronger than the last battle at the camp in the Snow Worship Sect. Again, Zhang Yixin tried to persuade Bian Junwu to leave with him. Even if the Jiangnan district wants to destroy the entire Tianhai City, if they have the captain of the investigation team in their hands, they will have more bargaining chips to communicate with the Jiangnan district in the future. Captain Bian, come with me. We still have hope if we leave here. Zhang Yixin, if you want to leave, just leave. I want to stay with my teammates. Bian Junwu smiled slightly and rejected Zhang Yixin's proposal. After all, he was a dying man, so of course he would not give up his teammates. And he also knew that no one in the investigation team was willing to give up his teammates and live alone. They were either going to live together or die together. And that's it. Zhang Yixin's face showed a twisted expression. Damn you, he cursed. Damn you, you really don't know what's good for you. In that case, don't blame me. Zhang Yixin turned around and flew away. With a gloomy face, he thought, they are already doomed. If the god of death of love comes at this time, these hard-cultivated zombies will still perish. Instead of that, it's better to go back and communicate with the bloodvines and let these zombies end their lives on their own. But these people are definitely going to die. Bian Junwu, if you don't appreciate this offer, It's your own loss. Zhang Yi was resolved in this decision he made. Even if the investigation team is completely wiped out, it will only cause dissatisfaction in the Jiangnan region. But as long as the zombie tide disappears, Tianhai City will not be flattened in a short time. Then, they still have a chance to develop slowly. As long as they are given a few more months, they can still cultivate a huge zombie army. Tianhai City lacks everything else, but not the dead. After Zhang Yi left, Zhang Yi also came to the vicinity of Bian Junwu and the others through constant flashing. The speed of his space shuttle was very fast. Even if he appears in the zombie group, he didn't need to worry about being attacked by them. With Bian Junwu's location being extremely easy to find, Zhang Yi appeared in front of him and everyone else, scaring them. Zhang Yi, why are you here? Everyone was surprised and happy to see Zhang Yi's sudden appearance. What surprised them was Zhang Yi's ability, and what made them happy was that Zhang Yi's appearance might bring hope of survival. After all, Zhang Yi's strength was one of the best in Tianhai City. When Bian Junwu saw Zhang Yi, he immediately asked, Zhang Yi, are you here to save us? Although everyone was trying their best to resist the zombies, everyone was paying attention to Zhang Yi. They were expecting a positive answer from him. Although they knew in their hearts that there was not much hope for this matter, people in despair would hold on to a straw even if they saw one. Zhang Yi gasped and said with a serious expression, the situation is worse than I thought. My teleportation ability can only take one person away from here at most. After hearing Zhang Yi's words, everyone's mood instantly dropped. I can only take one person away. Who should I take? If the zombie problem cannot be solved, it will be useless for anyone to leave here. Bian Junwu was also a little disappointed. However, he still asked rationally, what is your purpose in coming here? If you weren't sure you could rescue us, you wouldn't come here yourself, right? Zhang Yi said in a deep voice, I came here this time to give you a possibility. I have an idea. I am not sure whether it can produce results, but we can give it a try. Wu Di hurriedly said. Then tell me quickly. Everyone was waiting for Zhang Yi's life-saving straw. Zhang Yi continued in a deep voice. Do you still remember Yuan Konga's ice soul? Everyone naturally remembered that thing. Bian Junwu vaguely realized what Zhang Yi meant. Zhang Yi said to them, you should know that ice soul has two abilities. The first is to help those who have not awakened awaken their abilities. The second is to help those who have awakened unlock their potential and increase their strength. He took a deep breath and looked at Bian Junwu with an honest look. He didn't know if his high-tech glasses could see this look. To be honest, I got ice soul before and improved my supernatural power. That's why my supernatural power is still high in Tianhai City. Xiao Honglian also said, in fact, I have also used ice soul. If I'm not mistaken, Wei Dinghai and Xingtian have also used it. Zhang Yi was startled. This was the first time he heard of this news. Doesn't that mean that once they die, Yuan Konga will get their powerful supernatural powers? But if you think about it carefully, this makes sense. In the end times, strength is respected, and the leaders of the major forces will spare no effort to improve their strength in order to maintain their rule. Moreover, Ice Soul itself has no negative effects when the user is not dead. Zhang Yi lied that he had used Ice Soul because he knew that Ice Soul was not reliable. Once used, they would become Yuan Konga's prey. Moreover, he could not guarantee that Ice Soul had no side effects. Bian Junwu replied coldly and calculating. So what you mean is for us to use Ice Soul to increase our strength and then break through? Zhang Yi nodded. Now there is only one way to go. You are all top mutants. If you use Ice Soul, you may be able to break through your limits and become a more powerful mutant. Then, we will have a chance to fight our way out. Bailey, Chongqing, and the others frowned, and they were a little tempted. After all, the situation is critical now, and they must consider using all means to break through. Anyway, it is difficult for them to leave the zombies alive. Wu Di said to Bian Junwu anxiously. Boss, let's try it. Zhang Yi even generously took out an Ice Soul. This Ice Soul can be used by you. He had a total of 3 Ice Souls in his hand, and he didn't need too many of these unstable things. Bian Junwu glanced at Zhang Yi. Although he was wearing sunglasses, Zhang Yi still felt that his eyes were particularly cold. Zhang Yi's heart could not help but feel cold. He had a feeling of being seen through. Couldn't his little thoughts be hidden from Bian Junwu, an old man? At this moment, Bian Junwu, still calculating, was silent as he just stared at Zhang Yi for a considerable while, before he reached out and carefully took the small black wooden box handed over by Zhang Yi. He opened it, revealing the Ice Soul inside given to them by Yuan Konga. An artless smile crept on the corner of his lips as Zhang Yi sighed heavily. Zhang Yi had 3 Ice Soul in total, and it was necessary for the investigation team to keep theirs for the research laboratory in Jiangnan district. Zhang Yi had this insinuation and had no problem with it. At this point, we can only give it a try. Bien Junwoo said this as he stared meaningfully at the white spherical meatball in his hand. It was soft, icy and cool, and it seemed to be alive and moving slightly. But at this moment, Wu Di, worried about his health condition, hurriedly shouted, "Boss, let me do this too." Immediately as those words were said, the others also shouted with unwavering determination, suggesting they all do it together. They have experienced many life and death ordeals, and naturally know that this so-called ice soul may have side effects. Currently, with the crisis ahead, none of them are willing to retreat. Even if there are risks, they have to face it together. "No, it's enough for me to use it alone." Bien Junwoo took a deep look at Zhang Yi and thought that if he were to use the ice soul, then whatever the outcome may be, Zhang Yi will owe him a favor. So with this thought, Bien Junwoo did not hesitate and pressed the ice soul directly on his forehead. A deep smile appeared on the corner of Zhang Yi's mouth. His goal was achieved. Bailey Chongqing looked at Bien Junwoo, opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. On the other hand, Wu Di's face was painful. "Boss, let me do it. I can do it." The investigation team deeply knew why Bien Junwoo did this, and the reason on the surface was also pretty obvious at this point. Bien Junwoo's ability seriously overdrew his body, and his life would not be too long. As early as a month ago, they knew that even if Bien Junwoo retired to the second line to recuperate, he could only live for 2 years at most. But in order to strive for better living conditions for his wife and children, Bien Junwoo resolutely chose to stay in the front line. This old captain always rushed to the front when facing danger, protecting everyone from wind and rain. The ice soul quickly merged into Bien Junwoo's forehead. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi, who saw this scene from a distance, was stunned for a moment, and then an ecstatic expression appeared on his face. He didn't even dare to think that Bien Junwoo would actually use the ice soul. That kind of powerful superpower is something that Tianhai City has never had before, and the attack power is simply unstoppable. Zhang Yi knows even better that Bien Junwoo will not live long. As long as he dies, his power will fall on Yuan Konga. At that time, Yuan Konga will become a true Epsilon-level superhuman, the strongest level 5 known to mankind. And their wish will not be far away either. After Bien Junwoo completed the absorption of the ice soul, he did not feel the discomfort of fusion like Yangmin did. Soon, an extremely terrifying aura emerged from his body, making Zhang Yi tremble a little. The others felt a chill down their spine, which was an instinctive expression when encountering a powerful species. Bien Junwoo straightened his body. He slowly took off the sunglasses covering his eyes, revealing a pair of gray-white eyes. But now, the gray-white eyes showed 2 bright lights, which were so sacred, as if they could see through everything. "I haven't seen this world with my own eyes for a long time." Bien Junwoo regained his light and eyesight, and he smiled with relief. At this moment, he felt that his condition was very good, and it seems that endless power emerged from his body. That's right, he was no longer at the peak of Delta level, but officially entered the level of Epsilon. However, as the huge power emerged, his body seemed to have a rapidly expanding hole. His power emerged from the depths of his body, and slowly flowed away as the hole grew. The ice soul stimulated his potential, but it could not make up for the defects in his supernatural power, but instead expanded it. Bien Junwoo clenched his teeth tightly as a stream of blood flowed from both corners of his mouth. "Boss!" Wu Di and the others shouted nervously. Bien Junwoo raised his hand, and he said to everyone in a low and gentle voice, "Close your eyes." Everyone closed their eyes obediently. They stopped their attacks, and the corpse tide that lost its obstacles roared and pounced on them, like a huge wave that was about to drown them. But the next moment, in the middle of the corpse group, a light that was brighter and more vast than the sun broke out. No one could see what happened at the scene. They couldn't even hear any sound, but just felt a gentle sound of footsteps in their ears, as if walking towards dawn step by step. Despite Bien Junwoo's warning, Zhang Yi still quietly opened the dimensional door in front of him and opened his eyes. He also wanted to see how strong Bien Junwoo was in a fully awakened state. With the defensive power of his dimensional gate, he was qualified to take a look. Even if this pupil technique was too powerful, it would not hurt him unless it was aimed at him. Zhang Yi opened his eyes and saw Bien Junwoo's back. He had his hands in the pockets of his white high-temperature, resistant protective coat and slowly walked forward. The bright golden light enveloped the entire world. There were many dark shadows in the distance. They were the hideous and terrifying corpse tide, dense and countless. But Bien Junwoo turned a blind eye to them, as if they did not exist. The moment the dense black shadows appeared, they suddenly dissipated like smoke. Zhang Yi couldn't help swallowing. "Bien Junwoo, He was actually releasing his last glory, and it is truly a magnificent sight to witness. After clearing the zombies around him, he continued to kill them to eliminate the biggest disaster for his teammates. This level of supernatural power release will definitely cause his hidden injuries to explode rapidly. Zhang Yi looked at his back, and a touch of respect appeared in his eyes. Captain Bien, thank you for your efforts. Your sacrifice will not be in vain. I will make sure of it. Meanwhile, on a cliff a few distance away was Zhang Yi, whose eyes were crazy, and the corners of his mouth were almost raised. No, I can't laugh yet. We are just one step away from victory. That idiot Zhang Yi actually helped us so much. Zhang Yi laughed mischievously, and he continued. Now the leaders of the largest bases in Tianhai City and the border troops have all used the Ice Soul. We just need to kill them all, and we would be close to realizing our dream. It was unknown how much time had passed. Without Bien Junwu's order, no one dared to open their eyes, because the destructive power of the pupil technique Nirvana was too strong. Between heaven and earth, the dazzling golden light that enveloped everything on the battlefield moments ago was slowly disappearing. There was no trace of zombies around. Bien Junwu turned around and walked towards the crowd. Zhang Yi quickly closed his eyes and pretended that he didn't see anything. But the next moment he felt a hand on his shoulder. The hand was steady and powerful, heavy like a mountain. Zhang Yi suddenly became a little nervous, and only heard a cold voice in his ears. Zhang Yi, stop pretending already. Haven't you been watching this whole time? Zhang Yi smiled bitterly and slowly opened his eyes. It seems you discovered it all, Mr. Bien. But when he saw Bien Junwu's face, his smile was a little stiff, because his face was very cold, and there was even a meaningful smile at the corner of his mouth. Captain Bien, thank you for saving all of us. Zhang Yi quickly looked at Bien Junwu with a sincere look as he said this. Bien Junwu was unmoved, and his right hand was still on Zhang Yi's shoulder. A huge pressure enveloped Zhang Yi. Although he knew that Bien Junwu was dying, it would be easy for Bien Junwu to kill him at such a close distance after relying on an ice soul to break through to the Ypsilon level. You are so calculating that even I fell into your trap. Bien Junwu said to Zhang Yi with a knowing smile. Zhang Yi's face also became calm, and he whispered sincerely, sorry, I didn't want to do this at first. After all, this is a backup plan. With the way the situation developed, there was really no way. So I could only do this. Zhang Yi did not lie. Originally, he had prepared 3 plans, with the second countering the first and the third doing the same to the second if things goes wayward. These plans were just for the first stage, with the first 2 to eliminate the zombie tide, and the 3 to cut his losses and leave the city. The first plan was simple, and it was to use the fear of the Snow Worship Sect against the Jiangnan district to force them to give up the zombie army in their hands. Unfortunately, he underestimated the Snow Worship Sect's ability to control the zombie tide. In fact, at this time, when the zombie tide completely broke out, the Snow Worship Sect could not control the zombie tide. Just like the previous battle the sect faced, the bronze-armored flying corpse even attacked Yuan Konga and her close followers. The second plan was to let Bien Junwu and others use the Ice Soul to forcibly increase their strength to defeat the zombie tide. And as for the third plan, Zhang Yi and the others would give up Tianhai City and flee before the death of love came. If possible, he didn't want to do this. After all, he and Bien Junwu had no grudges. But in the out-of-control state, he would not hesitate to do so, because nothing is more important than him and the people around him being alive. Bien Junwu shook his head slightly. Anyway, let's forget about that. I'm not going to live long. So, in simple words, I want to thank you. Without your suggestion, I wouldn't have completed the most gorgeous bloom in my life. He lowered his head and looked at his hands. Is this the power of level 5 Ypsilon? It's really strong. It's a pity that there will be no next time. Suddenly, his tall body shook, and the hand on Zhang Yi's shoulder loosened. Zhang Yi hurriedly supported his body. Please rest assured, after you leave, I will solve the remaining problems in Tianhai City. Bien Junwu couldn't help but glance at him, and a hint of doubt flashed in his gray eyes. So, you are still hiding a lot of secrets. What are they, I wonder? Bien Junwu didn't wait for Zhang Yi's answer. He completed a gorgeous transformation at the last moment of his life, sublimated to the extreme, and released the power that truly belonged to level 5. But this also overdrawn all his life. He fell into Zhang Yi's arms, completely silent. Not long after, the others realized that the battle around them was over, and they opened their eyes one after another. The hundreds of thousands of zombies that had once appeared on the battlefield were almost gone at this time. Especially the powerful bronze-armored corpses and bronze-armored flying corpses. Not a single one was left. Xiao Honglian opened her eyes in disbelief, and her vocal cords trembled. It's over? Really? Is it over? Just now she was ready to die and be swallowed by endless zombies. But now that the crisis was over, she and the other two, Wei Dinghai and Xing Tian, were completely shocked and frightened by the scene in front of them. They shrank back a little and dared not approach. This was the first time they had seen such a scene in their lives. It also made them see how terrifying the power of mutants could be. It turned out that mutants with an Epsilon level strength could really surpass conventional weapons. It can be called a humanoid nuclear weapon. But the investigation team, on the other hand, had no time to rejoice. They understood what this level of power meant to Bian Junwu. Wu Di saw Bian Junwu in Zhang Yi's arms and let out a desperate cry in the cold wind. "Boss!" He rushed towards Zhang Yi, and then snatched Bian Junwu from Zhang Yi's arms. His eyes were full of fear, and he was panicking like a child. "Boss! Wake up, wake up! Don't sleep, you won't wake up if you fall asleep." He desperately shouted in Bian Junwu's ear, but there was only silence in response. Soon, this arrogant and domineering investigation team member burst into tears, crying like a child. Zhang Yi silently retreated to the back. He knew that it was time for these people to say goodbye. Bailey Chongqing and the others hurried over and surrounded Wu Di and Bian Junwu's body in the middle. Everyone had a sad look on their faces, but except Wu Di, no one cried, just put their right hands on their chests and silently saluted Bian Junwu. In the end times, as fighters, they have experienced too many life and death separations. This scene is not the first time they have seen it. Perhaps in the future, this is the fate of each of them. There is no need for too much crying and words, only the eternal respect in the heart. Wu Di hugged Bian Junwu's body tightly, crying non-stop as his shoulders shakes constantly. It was obvious at this point that he had a special relationship with Bian Junwu. One after another, Wei Dinghai, Xing Tian, Zhang Yi and the others who were originally a bit further away came closer to the scene. They didn't expect that the matter would be resolved in this way. However, seeing that hundreds of thousands of zombies were wiped out, everyone was relieved. A few minutes passed by like this, and Wu Di held Bian Junwu's body and sat on the ground in silence. Deputy Captain Bailey Chongqing had already frowned, and there was no sadness on his face. Now that the captain is dead, according to the regulations of the region, I will temporarily take over the position of captain. He took the communication device from Bian Junwu and contacted the senior management of the Jiangnan region with a serious expression. Everyone stared at him with a serious face. Now that the zombie group has been eliminated, the Jiangnan region should cancel the launch of the God of Death of Love as it said before. Bailey Chongqing reported the situation there to Zhu Zhang. After hearing the news, Zhu Zhang said in a deep voice, "Is he gone?" Bailey Chongqing heard Zhu Zhang sigh softly. "That's good. As a soldier, dying on the battlefield is his best fate. I believe he doesn't want to linger on in a hospital bed." Bailey Chongqing asked, "Commander-in-Chief, what is our next move?" Zhu Zhang looked at the big screen in front of him. Bailey Chongqing and the others were clearly visible on the screen. He slowly said, "Bring Bian Junwu back." The investigation team lost its highest combat power and command, and it was no longer a complete organization. Zhu Zhang didn't want his elite soldiers to be lost again. What's more, the corpse tide in Tianhai City has been cleared twice, and there will be no major turmoil in the short term. Bailey Chongqing replied that he understood the order. Then Zhu Zhang ended the call. Bailey Chongqing turned around and looked at Zhang Yi and the others and said, "Blizzard City has canceled the plan to launch the God of Death of Love." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Tianhai City was saved, and the foundation and homeland on which they depended for survival were also saved. Zhang Yi came over, crossed his hands on his chest, and recited a eulogy, praying for Bian Junwu and the deceased. But inwardly, Zhang Yi was extremely happy. Although hundreds of thousands of zombies were lost, this kind of thing can be recultivated sooner or later as long as there is enough time and nutrients. However, with the ability of Bian Junwu, this kind of harvest cannot be exchanged for anything else. Big profit, he thought with a smile. At this time, he looked at the people in the field, silently counting the number of people who had used the ice soul. The scenario was like an old farmer who has cultivated for a season and is waiting for the harvest. Then, very abruptly, Zhang Yi suddenly took out a sword from his alternate space, shocking everyone, especially the guy who was closest to him. He shouted in a panicked tone, "Zhang Yi, what are you going to do?" This was because Zhang Yi had turned towards him with his sword in hand. The guy, who happens to be one of the captains of Radiant Prosperity Base, was scared shitless as he took a couple steps back. "Isn't it obvious? I'm going to kill you," Zhang Yi sneered, then accelerated his movement at 8 times the speed with his ability, and stabbed forward fiercely. The sword, made of adamantium metal which was indestructible, coupled with Zhang Yi's supernatural power, made it possible for the sword to even cut through steel without difficulty. So this meant it could easily penetrate a body. Then, accompanied with a puff sound, the blade glowed with a strange blue light, and a wisp of blood slowly returned from the tip of the blade to the interface between the blade and the human body, soaking an already red cloak with fresh blood. The smile on Zhang Yixian's face disappeared. He lowered his head and looked at the tip of the knife that pierced through his chest, his eyes full of confusion. He didn't know where the knife came from, but in a flash he figured it out, because he saw Zhang Yi, who was clearly far away from him, stab the long sword in his hand towards the guy, but the blade strangely disappeared in midair. Zhang Yi pulled the long knife back directly. The existence of the blood groove made the knife more traumatic to the human body after it was pulled out, and the bleeding continued. Zhang Yixian fell to the ground forcefully, and with his chest pierced cleanly, he also began to cough out blood. At this moment, he couldn't raise his head to look at his attacker. Zhang Yi, what are you doing? With an accusatory finger pointed at Zhang Yi, Xiao Honglian frowned and scolded Zhang Yi in a loud tone. Everyone else looked at Zhang Yi, their eyes full of caution. Even if he'd had a bad relationship with the Snow Worship Sect in the past, they were in the same boat and had just defeated the Corpse Tide. It should have been a time of jubilation, but Zhang Yi secretly killed someone, which was really despicable. Bailey Chongqing and the other members of the investigation team frowned and watched, but did not say anything. They would not participate in the fight between local forces in Tianhai City, so they stay in the background. Unexpectedly, Liang Yu, Chunlei, and Uncle Yu suddenly appeared at the scene. They rushed from behind Zhang Yi, and a second later, they stood directly beside him, ready to fight at any time. The atmosphere at the scene was tense, and it seemed that a fight was about to break out. The priests of the Snow Worship Sect protected Zhang Yixian behind them with angry faces, and then made a posture of fighting to the death with Zhang Yi. Han Chong of the Snow Worship Sect had the most explosive temperament. Damn you, Zhang Yi, I will kill you. Han Chong bared his teeth and roared, cursing loudly. The atmosphere at the scene still remained tense, and it seems that a fight hadn't broke out immediately because everyone was just waiting for Zhang Yi to explain his actions. Clenching his teeth tightly, Zhang Yixian stared at Zhang Yi in pain and asked honestly, Zhang Yi, why did you do this? Although he wasn't the most powerful person in Tianhai City, Zhang Yixian's ability was telekinesis, so his defense was somewhat decent, and his physique was much stronger than that of ordinary people. But Zhang Yi's move just now was too fast and went straight through his body. Unexpectedly, with the use of the double doors, the angle of the attack just now was not good enough, and due to this, Zhang Yixian's heart was not directly penetrated. However, with his chest pierced, he no longer had the strength to fight. So even if his fellow sect members fought, it would be very disadvantageous to them. After all, everyone knew how strong the combat effectiveness of Zhang Yi's team was. On the other hand, the other leaders, especially Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai, looked at Zhang Yi with dissatisfaction in their eyes. As Wei Dinghai's frown deepens, he coldly questioned, Zhang Yi, you need to give us an explanation for this matter. Otherwise, we will not sit idly by. Although they don't care about the life and death of the Snow Worship Sect, Zhang Yi's approach was too dangerous. This also made them think that Zhang Yi wanted to take the opportunity to eliminate the major forces in Tianhai City. And for this reason, they had to be on guard. A sinister, yet mocking smile crept on Zhang Yi's lips as he calmly questioned Zhang Yixian. Although Zhang Yixian has lost his fighting ability and the current situation was slipping out of his control, he was still confident that no one knew about their secret. Zhang Yixian, at this point, are you still going to pretend? Zhang Yi held his long sword tightly in his hand, and with a sneer on his face and narrowed eyes, he pointed it accusatory at Zhang Yixian, and said word by word, Isn't the biggest behind-the-scenes mastermind of the Corpse Tide in Tianhai City your damn snow-worshipping cult? These words were spoken with great force, and the content expressed in the words shocked everyone present. Xiao Honglian widened her eyes. What? The mastermind behind the Corpse Tide is the Snow Worship Sect? The investigation team and the other major forces, including the priests of the Snow Worship Sect, also showed an expression of disbelief. Han Chong bared his teeth and rushed forward a few steps in the form of a flat-headed brother. He yelled at Zhang Yi, What nonsense are you talking about? Do you know how many followers our sect has lost in this zombie tide? Xing Tian also said to Zhang Yi, Old friend, the Snow Worship Sect suffered the most tragic losses in this zombie tide. If they were really the mastermind, they wouldn't do such a stupid thing, right? Zhang Yi turned his head and looked coldly at Zhang Yixian, who was kneeling on the ground, covering his chest. A gloomy and crazy look appeared in Zhang Yixian's eyes. He never dreamed that Zhang Yi would discover their secret. Shut up, you scoundrel. Stop spouting nonsense. Do you really think anyone will believe you? Zhang Yi laughed. Whether everyone believes me or not, they will naturally analyze it after I finish speaking. Zhang Yixian, what are you afraid of? After hearing Zhang Yi's words, everyone was finding it difficult to believe it. And although none of them believed Zhang Yi's words to be true, they wouldn't lose anything if they hear him out. After all, Zhang Yi hurt Zhang Yixian, not them. And the information Zhang Yi said was too explosive. They all wanted to hear what was going on. Zhang Yi said loudly, "Everyone, from the very beginning, all of this was a conspiracy of the Snow Worship Sect. And it all started with the Ice Soul. It's true that the Ice Soul can awaken people's abilities and enhance their potential. But its real function is to allow the superpowers of the person who uses the Ice Soul to return to Yuan Konga's body after that person dies. That's why they've been so generous in giving us the Ice Soul, and they spared no effort to start a war in Tianhai City with the goal of killing more people. Even if it's their own followers, it doesn't matter if they are sacrificed. After all, ordinary followers will only be a burden and are inherently worthless. They absorb a large number of followers just to select those with potential to become mutants and then awaken their abilities. Then let them die so that their abilities would return to Yuan Konga. So, even if all the members of the sect died, it didn't matter to Yuan Konga, because from the very beginning, she didn't need so many followers. She has something better to use. That is the zombie army she created. Compared to ordinary humans, this undead army that completely obeyed orders was powerful and not easy to die, and that's her real trump card." Zhang Yi's words made the air quiet. This information was too explosive, and no one could easily believe it. Xing Tian, Xiao Honglian, Wei Dinghai, Bailey Chongqing and his team from the crowd couldn't help but look at him, wanting to get some answers from his face. Zhang Yixian gritted his teeth and said angrily, "You are talking nonsense. Slander. You are slandering us. How could the Snow Worship Sect have such a thing? If we really have the ability to control the zombies, why were we suppressed by the other major forces in the first place? Without real evidence, you attacked me based on your own speculations. And based on your actions, I suspect you are the mastermind behind everything." Zhang Yixian pointed at Zhang Yi and said coldly. Everyone at the scene looked at Zhang Yixian, then looked at Zhang Yi and was immediately confused. Zhang Yixian's statement was obviously more in line with their understanding. Back then, the Snow Worship Sect was squeezed out by the 4 major bases and could only survive in the cracks, using the Ice Soul to exchange for breathing space. How could the sect suddenly control hundreds of thousands of zombies in just a few months? If Zhang Yi and Zhang Yixian were more suspicious, then it would undoubtedly be Zhang Yi. After all, Zhang Yi's power is still intact. Zhang Yi said calmly, "There is an abandoned building next to St. John's Cathedral, and there is a huge blood-colored vine in it. Its function is to absorb nutrients from corpses and the earth, and then cultivate corpse kings. The corpse kings have the ability to spread viruses and create zombies. The reason why the people of the Snow Worship Sect did not use this trump card before could either be that they didn't want to, or it wasn't time yet, or because the blood vine has not yet fully matured." Zhang Yi pointed his finger in the direction of the headquarters of the Snow Worship Sect and said seriously, "Since you say I have no evidence, do you dare to take us to the Snow Worship Sect? Dig up the blood vine, and we will know the result at a glance." That's right, hearing is false, seeing is believing. In fact, they all had their eyes on the abandoned building when they were defending the camp of the Snow Worship Sect. They also sent people to investigate secretly. It's just that the results of the investigation were not satisfactory. It was found that it was just a mutant plant that could produce food. But Zhang Yi's words immediately aroused their suspicion. Xiao Honglian crossed her arms and said to Zhang Yixian, "Zhang Yixian, if you have a clear conscience, just follow what Zhang Yi said and take us there to have a look." Wei Dinghai also said lightly, "Yes, we will know whether it is true or not. We can also clear your name at that time." Xing Tian nodded. "I agree with this approach." Zhang Yixian's heart sank. He endured the severe pain in his chest and said to Zhang Yi, "If you find that there is nothing there, how are you going to explain what you did? You can't stab me in vain." Zhang Yi's mouth curled up with a sneer. "If we find out that you are innocent, then I guessed wrong. You and your entire cult can come and fight me." Hearing this, Zhang Yixian's eyes became gloomy, and he was extremely furious. Zhang Yi's behavior was too shameless, but he had no other choice. Even the other forces around him didn't think Zhang Yi did anything wrong. It was the end of the world, and killing and looting were common. The major forces had fought to the death, and there were many grudges. They didn't care about Zhang Yi and the Snow Worship Sect. They only cared about whether what Zhang Yi said was true. Was the outbreak of the zombie tide related to the Snow Worship Sect? Han Chong said angrily beside Zhang Yixian, "Fine, we will do the right thing and take a look at the blood vine. We are not afraid of you, and if we find out that it is not what you said, I will definitely pull your intestines out." Zhang Yixian suddenly shouted in a low voice, "No! We must not let them get close to the blood vine. The group looked at Zhang Yi, not quite understanding what he said. Although Bailey Chongqing and his team hadn't expressed their opinions all this while, it was not difficult to see from the expressions on their faces that they clearly planned to go there to have a look. After all, they also suspected that there was a problem there at the beginning. It was just that time was limited and they did not have enough of it to observe carefully. What's more, they still didn't know the cause of the corpse tide in Tianhai City, and their beloved captain, Bian Junwu, even died in this whole conspiracy. They didn't want to leave any regrets. So, if they could investigate the cause of the corpse tide and report back, they would be worthy of Bian Junwu's sacrifice and have a way to explain to the top leaders of the Jiangnan region. Bailey Chongqing and his team stared at Zhang Yi with serious eyes. Are we not allowed to go? Is there a ghost there perhaps? At this point, everyone present were all tempted. They wanted to know if what Zhang Yi said was true, and Zhang Yixian's earlier refusal had become suspicious. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai took on a fighting stance when they saw Zhang Yixian on his feet, and again, refused to let anyone investigate the bloodvine. Although no one knew about the sudden attack on Zhang Yixian, they understood the problem of the snow worship sect. Therefore, everyone was not panicked, but took a stance to fight. Zhang Yixian claims that the bloodvine is the foundation of their sect, and Zhang Yi must be planning to take the bloodvine. What if we take them there and they try to snatch the bloodvine? Han Cheng roared loudly. Zhang Yi, you are so despicable. We almost fell into your trap, but since you want to fight, then we will fight you. Zhang Yixian gave the order for Han Cheng and the others to attack Zhang Yi and his team. They should let them know that their sect was not so easy to mess with. The priests believed Zhang Yixian's words, and upon hearing Zhang Yixian's command, those who had been holding back to fight Zhang Yi immediately rushed up with a howl. More than a dozen priests roared and rushed towards Zhang Yi and his group. Zhang Yi raised a sneer at the corner of his mouth. He really didn't take these scum of the snow worship sect seriously. At this time, Zhang Yi, who had always been steady, rarely walked to the front of the crowd. He covered his eyes with his right hand and said lightly, "Enough! I don't have so much time to entangle with you here now." When he put down his right hand, a white light flashed in the pupil of his eyes, and the people who were stared at by his eyes only felt that the entire space around them was distorted. Suddenly, an indescribable force began to tear their bodies from all angles in the three-dimensional space. Almost at the same time, the upper half of the bodies of the 7 priests exploded on the way forward, turning into blood-colored powder all over the sky. The other priests were so scared that they stood there stupidly. The terrifying scene in front of him made Han Cheng, the most courageous one, lose the courage to charge, and his feet halted on the ground uncontrollably. Bailey Chongqing was a little absent-minded when he saw this scene. It's that pupil technique? This was the first time Zhang Yi displayed his divine power in front of outsiders. He had used it during the battle of the 5 major forces, but at that time, his proficiency in his divine power was not high, and he only used it for targeted killing. But now, he has completely mastered this ability, and killed 7 priests of the snow worship sect in one shot. Such a terrible power made Xiao Honglian, Xing Tian, Wei Dinghai and the others dumbfounded. Only then did they understand how powerful Zhang Yi was. His ability had a strong offense and defense. And what's more, his sniping ability also made his long-range assault terrifying. All their previous thoughts about Zhang Yi's ability shuddered like a broken glass. At this moment, Chunlei suddenly pointed to the distance and shouted, "Boss, Zhang Yixian is running away." Zhang Yixian actually took advantage of the opportunity when the priests charged and turned around and ran away. Zhang Yixian, who has telekinesis, can control his body to fly at a very fast speed. Zhang Yi's eyes condensed and he said to Bailey Chongqing and the others, "Not good. He is going back to inform Yuan Konga. That woman is the most dangerous person in Tianhai City. We must get rid of her. Otherwise, everyone may die after the relationship is torn apart." Bailey Chongqing stared at Zhang Yi. "Why should we believe you?" Zhang Yi replied calmly, "Trust me, you will not lose anything. Whether it is true or not, you will know it when you go and see it yourself. The elites of the Jiangnan region will not be fooled by me so easily, right?" After Zhang Yi finished speaking, he took out his car without caring about them, and called on his team and everyone to head to the camp of the snow worship sect. As for the priests who were lucky enough to survive, such as Han Cheng, they were already scared out of their wits, so how could they dare to stop them? Bailey Chongqing thought about it and said immediately, "Let's go and take a look. It's time to put an end to this matter in Tianhai City. We have to find out truth about the situation, and can't let the captain die in vain." The investigation team immediately decided to go and take a look. As for Xiao Honglian, Xing Tian, and Wei Dinghai, they had the same idea. Anyway, so far, this matter has no conflict with them. Since Zhang Yi took the initiative to propose that the snow worship sect was suspected of manipulating the corpse tide, they would go and take a look. They would not suffer any loss. So, everyone found a suitable means of transportation and rushed to the snow worship sect. Meanwhile, at the camp of the snow worship sect, inside St. John's Cathedral Church, Yuan Konga knelt in front of the altar and prayed devoutly. Suddenly, she opened her bright eyes. Just now, she felt a powerful superpower returning to her body. Whose superpower is this? She questioned with an evident surprise. Pupil technique? It seems to be that of the investigation team leader Bien Junwoo. Yuan Konga's eyes flickered like stars, then calmly returned to normal, and a sweet smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She could clearly feel how strong Bien Junwoo's power was. But the next moment, she frowned again. Bien Junwoo is dead? How could he die? Who else in the whole Tianhai city can kill him, and who else dares to kill him? Bien Junwoo has a special identity and represents the Jiangnan region. His death will also attract the attention of the Jiangnan region. Yuan Konga frowned, and she vaguely felt that some situations seemed to have gotten out of control. Not long after, in the distance in the air, a figure flew quickly towards the St. John's Cathedral Church. Zhang Yixian's current condition wasn't good. His face was even paler than the heavy snow between heaven and earth. His blood was bright red. A huge blood flower bloomed on his chest, and blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. Although Zhang Yi's sword pierced his chest cleanly, if he had received effective treatment at the time, he could have saved his life. But he knew that if he continued to stay there, their affairs would definitely be exposed. So he had to come back and tell Yuan Konga everything so she could be prepared. He could die, but Yuan Konga must not be in trouble. Zhang Yixian landed in front of the church, and as he approached the entrance, one of the mutants who stayed behind and was stationed to guard the entrance of the church saw Zhang Yixian and was shocked by his injuries. But Zhang Yixian didn't even look at him. The guy expressed his concern and offered his assistance. However, this actions only infuriate Zhang Yixian. A murderous look flashed in his eyes that made the guard tremble in fear. Zhang Yixian then walked past him to the door of the church. He didn't have much time, and he had to see Yuan Konga as soon as possible. He pushed open the door, and almost immediately, Yuan Konga seemed to feel something and turned around suddenly. She saw Zhang Yixian, who was seriously injured. Yuan Konga's pupils suddenly shrank, and she walked quickly to his side. Zhang Yixian saw his beloved, and his last breath was mostly lost, so he fell down all of a sudden. If it weren't for the belief in his heart that supported him, he would have died halfway. Yuan Konga reached out and caught his body. Zhang Yixian, what's wrong with you? For the first time, there was uneasiness in Yuan Konga's cold voice. As she said that, she reached out to treat Zhang Yixian's injuries. With her ability, as long as the person is still alive, no matter how serious the injury is, she can heal it. However, Zhang Yixian grabbed her wrist. Don't waste your power on me. My injury is too serious. Saving me will consume too much of your energy. Danger is coming soon. If our affairs are exposed, they will kill you. You have to live well. Yuan Konga's arm stopped in midair and did not fall. Zhang Yixian's face showed a weak smile. He looked at Yuan Konga's indifferent face, but saw a trace of reluctance in her eyes. Zhang Yixian smiled, and in the end, he understood that Yuan Konga was not without feelings for him. You have to live well, for our ideals. He fell into Yuan Konga's arms and slowly closed his eyes. Being able to die in the arms of a loved one, such an ending is not a regret for him, but a kind of happiness. Zhang Yixian finally died, and his superpower also returned to Yuan Konga. Not long after, Zhang Yi and the rest arrived at the camp of the Snow Worship Sect. Led by Zhang Yi, Bailey Chongqing, Xiao Honglian, and the others immediately walked towards the abandoned building next to the church. On the way there, they passed by the church. Zhang Yi noticed that the door of St. John's Cathedral Church was half closed. He knew that Zhang Yixian must have come to find Yuan Konga. At this time, Yuan Konga would definitely be on guard, so it wouldn't be an easy task to attack her. Of course, Zhang Yi had no such plan, because at this moment, no one knew how many kinds of superpowers Yuan Konga had mastered and how powerful her was. He did not dare to attack rashly. At this point, the problem of the zombie tide should have come to an end. Whether the zombie crisis was caused by the Snow Worship Sect, they could tell by looking at it. Zhang Yi led everyone. Come with me, I'll prove it to you.